Hello everyone, and welcome to a new part of What If Deku Was Iron Man. I hope you enjoy. If you do, please like and subscribe, it helps the channel. I did not write the story. The original writer is mrkage, please support them. Let's dive in. To say that he was worried would be like saying that All Might was just a hero. He was terrified. His girlfriend was supposed to have a good time, or as close as one could get to it with Aizawa-san there, but instead was attacked by a bunch of villains. Well, her and other students, but she was more important, no matter how bad that sounded. Izuku's decision to go there was an obvious choice. He was well aware of the consequences. He was basically playing himself into the dirty, sticky palms of the Prime Minister and burning trash can. Did he care? Not really. They could always run away from Japan after securing the training camp. He would feel bad for not saying goodbye to his mom, but he knew that she would understand. Hopping onto the board of Urania with Mei and Toshi, they turned on the damn thing and speed to the location of the camp. He was pretty sure that the new invention broke some of the pre-quirk Guinness records, but he would think about it later. Right now, he and Toshi stood their ground, playing the divider, between his girlfriend, her teacher, classmate, a little boy, and two identical villains. He focused entirely on the criminal's shocked expressions. Nisu. The one on the right began saying, but a quick repulsor blast silenced him, pushing the man on the ground. Izuku wasn't playing the nice guy anymore. Toshi swung his whip, striking the torso of the other villain, downing him instantly. Walking a bit forward, he raised his hands, aiming carefully at the criminal. "How many of you are you there? What are your objectives?" he asked coldly, being wary of any potential tricks. The man chuckled and smirked lightly. "Beats me," he replied smugly. Just as the azure tongues of flames showed up on his face, Izuku released his blasts, one to the chest, other to the head. Imagine his surprise when suddenly the whole body turned into mud. A sound of a machine gun rang through the clearing. Turning to the side, he saw Toshi standing above another pile of mud, a little smoke coming from the rifle on his shoulder. "I've used my quirk on him, but it looked like he had no memory at all," the teen told him, gazing around for any sign of trouble. Releasing a quiet sigh, he turned around and walked to his girlfriend. Opening his face mask, he smiled a bit at her and pulled her into a hug. "We were scared," he whispered, nuzzling into her neck. Momo chuckled briefly. "Sorry for worrying you." She pushed herself off a bit and kissed him lightly on the lips. "But can you tell me one thing? What is this?" she shouted, pointing at the sky. Izuku smirked at her and looked up. A few hundred meters above them was Urania, his new pride and joy. His own helicarrier. He designed it to be as close to the movie version from the first Avengers as he could. But of course, there were some changes. For starters, it was much smaller, closing to only 100 meters, and had only one deck. There were only two turbines that gave more than enough lift to keep it in the air. At the back was an array of big repulsors that served as the thrusters to push the whole thing forward. He wanted to have it use the repulsor tech for the lift too, but it would take too long to create repulsors of that size. The whole thing was constructed using Puppy's old, zero-pointer body for the mainframe. He really needed to send a giant thank you to all workers and factories that took part in creating that piece of art. "Let's call a fancy, private air cruiser," he replied, chuckling at the gawked expression of Todoroki-san and the little kid. Koda, if he remembered correctly. Hearing a sound of repulsors, he turned to the site and saw his other baby closing into their position. The Quinjet. It was slightly similar to the ones in the movie. It had folded wings and very aerodynamic shape, but for the thrusters and hovering it used a set of repulsors. Plus Mei was the one who decided on the paint job, so it was black gold. Not that it looked terrible, it just wasn't his style. "And this is fancy, private aeroplane?" Momo questioned, shaking her head in amusement. He just nodded, smiling brightly. The Quinjet settled down, and the back door opened. Through them, Mei shot out, enveloping their girlfriend in a tight hug. "You're never ever going somewhere without us again," the girl whispered loudly, her voice shaky. A few tears escaped from her eyes. "I won't," Momo said, planting a kiss on top of Mei's head. Puppy walked out from the aircraft, carrying Night Raven. When it gave the device to Aizawa-san, he could swear that he saw the man hug it tightly and even kiss it. "All right, listen up," he called out loudly and clapped his hands to get others' attention. "From Urania, we saw that the fire is slowly spreading through the forest. We've already called authorities, but it's going to take a while for them to arrive. Until then." He peeked at his girlfriends. May, take Puppy and the Quinjet and go to that area with the purple cyclone. Check it out and search for any students," he commanded, getting a nod from her. Toshi and Aizawa-san spread out and fly around the forest. "Take out any villains that you find and escort the students in that direction." "Since when are you in command?" Eraser questioned nonchalantly, securing Night Raven's straps around his body. "Did I say anything wrong?" he asked with a smug grin. "I'll go around and look for the students nearby," Momo declared, putting on her visor that no doubt May grabbed from the armory. "I'll go with you," Todoroki-san said, stepping closer. "Actually, Todoroki-san, I'd prefer you to stay here," Izuku told the teen, getting a raised eyebrow. "You're arguably the strongest student on the camp. With your ice and fire, you can protect the cabin from any villains that come here." He reasoned with the boy, believing that the student would turn this place into the fortress. "Also, you're on the villains' kidnap list," Momo added, accidentally dropping the figurative bomb. "The what?" Aizawa-san asked harshly, snapping his gaze to Todoroki-san. Izuku released a sigh. Great, another worry on their heads. Not only they had a bunch of villains but also had to fret over kidnapping for whatever reason the criminals had. "Enough talking. Spread out," he commanded, watching all of them move, leaving the clearing. He too was about to fly off, but he felt a tug at his arm. Looking down, he saw the kid gazing at him shyly. "My aunt is out there. Can you save her?" the boy asked in pleadingly. He smiled lightly before closing his mask. "That's what I'm here for." Hitoshi flew high up to get a good grasp of the situation. Northeast from here was that giant vortex of purple mist that May was going to fly towards. Eraserhead went northwest, pushing Night Raven to its limits. He guessed that the man was anxious about his students. Izuku speeded towards the clearing that had 4 people in there, who fought among each other. The whole arena was enclosed in a ring of blue fire that was slowly spreading to the different parts of the forest. Straight north it was. Lowering himself to fly just above the tree line, Toshi searched with his eyes for any students or villains, who would no doubt hide somewhere in there. But his mind was occupied with something else. He thought about how his life had changed from the sports festival. He got to meet and became friends with 3 amazing people, who didn't think of him any less due to his genes. He was on the path toward heroics along with those people. Honestly, he would die for any of them. A gruesome thought, but true nonetheless. How would his life look like if he didn't stop when May called him? Would he still be stuck at Gen Ed, wallowing in the self-pity? Would he be bitter about not thinking about ways to make his dream come true? Like training his body, taking up martial arts and so on. How much more dull his life would be if he chose to continue isolating himself from the world. He shook his head lightly. It wasn't the time to be distracted with that kind of thoughts. A sudden movement that he almost missed made him stop. A student with a bandana, carrying another student over shoulders, was running through the forest at the neck-breaking pace. Behind him was... what the heck was that? A large creature with mint green skin, a weird purple helmet that left part of the brain exposed, and gag in its mouth. 6 long, muscly arms growing from its back, each ended with a deadly chainsaw. Was that a Nomo? It had to be. Hitoshi saw the footage of those monsters as they ran amok on Hosu. And now he was about to face one of those freaks. Joy! He flew down, speeding up as much as he could. Correcting his course, he flew directly behind the monster, and at the last second, he twisted himself in the air, hitting it with a vicious kick. The beast stumbled and growled at him, but before it could attack, Hitoshi unleashed dual repulsor blast, pushing the thing into the trees. "Who are you?" the boy asked, catching his breath. He must have run for quite a while. "An ally," he replied shortly, landing on the ground and observing Nomu. "What's her status?" "She's unconscious. She breathed some of the gas," the teen informed him. "Some of my classmates ran that way, hoping to stop it from spreading." Hitoshi clicked his tongue. While he commended the effort, he couldn't help but think that those guys basically delivered themselves on the silver platter to the villain. And if any of those students were on the kidnap list, then it only added the worry. Before he could say anything else, the beast rushed at him, swinging its arms widely. Leaning back, he avoided the deadly blades. However, he didn't expect it to use its normal arms, grabbing him in a most likely bone-crushing hug that made his armor whine slightly from a pressure. Thinking fast, he unleashed a volley of rubber bullets, straight into Nomu's head, breaking the hold and helmet. Boy, was that thing nasty. Uppercutting the thing's head, he used a short pulse from his feet repulsors, lifting himself up and driving his elbow to the exposed brain. The creature screeched loudly, and its knees buckled. Swinging his arms over his head, he released his whips and brought them down onto Nomu's back. "Down, dog!" he yelled as it fell. Creating some distance between him and the monster, he peeked at the student, who watched the display in awe. "Hide somewhere," he ordered, getting the teen out of the bubble. Quickly selecting a contact from the list, he opened the channel with May. "Gearhead, be careful there. The gas is some kind of sleeping agent, similar to Midnight's Mist. Plus some students went out there to try and solve the issue," he told her, watching as the beast slowly rose up. "Why won't that thing just stay down?" "Copy that. Thanks for the call." May replied quickly and closed the link. Rolling his neck, he planted his feet firmly on the ground and lowered his stance a bit. The armor on his torso opened, showing 2 massive speakers. "Let's see how you like it," Hitoshi murmured with a lazy smirk. Activating Present Mic 3.0, he unleashed a powerful sound wave. All the trees on its way were raptured in some places, even a bit of ground got blown away. As for the Nomu, it was brought down to its knees, its whole body shaking. He could only try and guess if the creature was screaming. What shocked him was the fact that it actually started moving towards him. It crawled on the ground, planting its hands deep into the soil, to close the gap between them. Okay, the strongest thing in his arsenal didn't do anything against it. Fan-fucking-tastic. He doubted that his machine gun would do any better. He could change its mode and use demolition ammo, but if it also proved ineffective, he would be in trouble. Plus when he hit it, he could feel that this thing was tough as brick or even harder. Wait. Hitoshi's lips stretched into a wide grin as he found a solution. Cutting off PM 3.0, he selected the right type of ammo. The beast rushed at him, the second the sound waves vanished. Using a barrage of repulsor's blasts, he stopped the creature's assault, waiting for his machine gun to reload its ammunition. Nomu wailed loudly and pushed through the attacks. Jumping up, it swung one of its chainsaw arms down at him, only for it to be blown away with a loud bang. When it got closer to him, Hitoshi swung his fist, unleashed a vicious haymaker to the thing's temple, knocking it to the side. He was so thankful that May gave him some highly penetrative ammunition. He only had 4 shots left, but looks like it proved to be effective. Looking at the creature, he saw that black, thick blood was coming from the damaged limb. Nomu sprung back to it and screeched loudly. He wasn't sure if it was from pain or if it was some kind of battle cry. But he was sure as hell that he managed to piss off the beast. Once again it charged at him blindly, but with his precise shots, he made it stumble along the way. Now, the good news was that the beast was down to 2 regular arms and 1 chainsaw. The bad news was that he was out of his ammo. Due to its closeness, he couldn't react in time when Nomu rushed at him and pinned him with its shoulder against the tree. Using his left, he tried to pry it away from his, but it wouldn't budge. What added to his problem was the fact that Chainsaw was slowly closing to his head, as the chains dug deeper and deeper into the wood. "Get of me!" Hitoshi yelled, unleashing Unibeam at the beast. The horrible stench of burned skin and meat made him gag, but he didn't give and continued pressing his chest at the release mechanism. Activating repulsors in his feet, he finally gained necessary power to escape from the monster. Putting a bit of distance between him and Nomu, he looked at the beast and discovered that ultimately he got rid of its left arm, leaving still smoking wound on the shoulder. The remaining chainsaw arm was also damaged, hanging limply from the back. The creature itself writhed in pain, supporting its weight against the tree. Before he could proceed with rendering the thing unable to fight, it suddenly snapped its head behind. Giving out a curt whimper, Nomu stood up on shaky legs and started running away, quickly disappearing in the thicket. Hitoshi thought about chasing after it but decided against it. He still had students here that needed to be secured. Finding them after a short search, he kneeled next to them and opened his helmet. "Did you beat it?" the teen asked, hopefully. "It ran away, but I don't think it's going to pose a danger to anyone." He was sure that the beast, while still out there, wouldn't be able to fight. "Can you walk? We need to get out of here." He wasn't sure if the location was safe. The student nodded and took his classmate in the Princess Carry hold. "Everyone, we have a problem." Not even 3 steps later, Aizawa-san's voice rung in his earpiece. May was so glad that they ended preparing Urania in time. She was proud of that baby. Not only it was a great use of Puppy's old body, but also it was one of the greatest masterpieces that she ever took part in creating. But what she was even prouder of was the Quinjet. During the works on that massive project that had few builds in it, she personally oversaw that one. While the design changed several times during the construction process, it turned beautifully. It had a sleek look, was super fast, and was stylish. But what was even more important, it was completely waterproof and could go to space if launched correctly. Beat that fancy aeroplane from my island. Mei couldn't even describe how glad she was that her girlfriend was safe and sound. She was mortified when they heard the message from her. The visions of Momo being wounded just flooded her mind and made her heart clench tightly. She didn't know what she and Izuku would do if their girl ended up in a hospital, hooked up to machines, barely clinging to her life. Or worse. She didn't like worse. Gearhead, be careful there. The gas is some sleeping agent, similar to Midnight's Mist. Plus some students went out there to try and solve an issue. Toshi's voice cut through her headset, stopping the gruesome thoughts from overwhelming her. Copy that. Thanks for the call. She replied quickly, already changing her focus back to the mission. Clicking a button on the panel, she closed the air circulation so not even 1 ounce of it would get inside. They got closer to the vortex, and Mei steered Quinjet to do laps around its center. Was the gas flammable? If yes, then it could easily explode, thanks to plasma from repulsors. This wouldn't be good. They already had conflagration at their hands. Hovering above the eye of the cyclone, she saw a lone figure standing there, smoke pouring from their body. So that was the source. Zooming with her quirk, she saw that they held a gun in their hand, aiming somewhere ahead of them. Could the students be there already? She frowned lightly at it. What could she possibly do to overcome the situation? Obviously, take out that villain. But how? She sighed silently. Looks like she needed to get her hands dirty. Puppy, we're going to do something risky. She announced to her baby and further elaborated on her plan. Making sure that her child understood it completely, she stood up from her pilot sit and moved to the back of Quinjet. Fishing out a breathing mask, she secured it around her face. Taking her bow and quiver, already having 1 arrow in her hand, she signaled to Puppy that she was ready. The door opened, and Quinjet sped up, slightly diving down. A purplish mist filled the inside of the machine. That was the moment where she knew that Puppy turned off the engine. Why? To avoid igniting the gas. When they hit the center of the vortex, air cleared slightly, and with it, Mei ran to the edge and jumped off. She was quite high in the air, but she believed in her ability to lessen the impact. Pulling the arrow on the string, she quickly aimed at the criminal. The villain, while certainly caught off guard, still pointed the gun at her. Leaving everything in the hands of Lady Luck, she released her arrow as the bang sounded through the air. She bit back the pained yell as she felt the bullet pierce through her thigh. Holy crap, that hurt. Not even hitting herself with a hammer was remotely close to it. Despite the great pain she experienced, she did her best to land correctly, breaking her fall with a roll. However, that just put even more strain upon her injured limb, only adding to the overly uncomfortable sensation. Looking over her shoulder, she saw that her arrow was stuck in the villain's shoulder. The criminal gripped the wound, trying to lessen the blood loss. The gun laid on the ground. But what was the most important, was the fact that the gas stopped pouring from their body. She already could see the cyclone stopping and slowly disappearing. Pushing through her suffering, Mei stood up and ran to the best of her ability at the villain. It was more like jumping on her uninjured leg, but it still got her closer to her target. Damn you! The criminal screamed at her. His voice sounded male, but it was rather young. He lunged at her in despair attempt. But Mei wasn't just inventor. She trained hard her archery and close-quarter combat skills. She trained hard to protect not only civilians but other heroes too, especially her lovers and friends. Mei Hatsune wasn't just an inventor, she was the Hawkeye. Aiming carefully, she gripped her bow and swung hard, releasing a yell that was a mix of her determination and pain. She hit the villain right on the neck, pushing his body to the ground. She felt right after him, losing her balance due to unsteady footing. Snapping her gaze back at the guy, she saw that he was still conscious and tried to stand up. Oh no, she wouldn't have any of that. Pushing herself slightly up, she punched him across the face, struck his chin. That seemed to do the trick as his body went limp. Taking a deep breath, she rolled on her back and sat up. Inspecting her wound, she saw that she was bleeding quite heavily, but on the plus side, it looked like the bullet went through her tight. Taking off her belt, she wrapped it tightly above the place where the wound was, trying to stop the bleeding. While doing it, she looked around and saw a few bodies of students. All of them seemed to be unconscious. Suddenly from the brush showed up a guy with a weird silver eyebrow and a girl with orange hair. Wait, she knew her. She was friends with Momo, and by extension with her. Hatsune-san. Where did you come from? The girl shouted, running up to her. My God, you're hurt. She kneeled next to her and applied pressure to the wound. May bit back a hiss from the action. Black spots began to show up in the corner of her vision, and her mind felt a bit fuzzy. I'm the cavalry. Others are taking care of other areas. She informed the girl. Puppy, get the Quinjet down and bring me a medkit. She told her baby through the earpiece. She felt like she was going to pass out soon. All she needed to do was to pack those students on board and take them back to the cabin. She deserved the rest. She worked hard, got shoot, and was awfully worried about her girlfriend. Everyone, we have a problem. The voice of Hobo Caterpillar sounded through her earpiece. God damn it, being a hero was hard. Momo pushed her legs as hard as she could, speeding with her bike through the forest. While she said that she was going to look close to the cabin, she was, in fact, running back to where the root of the courage game was. She knew very well that her lovers and teacher would oppose that idea. Of course, she felt awful for lying to them, but she needed to make sure that her classmates were safe. She could even express her joy when she saw her lovers and friend coming to the rescue. The relief washed over her, almost making her forget about the horrible situation they were in. And she wasn't just speaking about the raid on the camp. Izuku broke the law. He broke the quirkless hero ban law. Her boyfriend did that just to come and save her and their schoolmates. Were they going to run away from the country with Urania immediately? She was sure that this air cruiser that her lovers build would be able to take them safely to Island. She shook her head, getting rid of unnecessary thought. Right now, thinking about it would do her nothing good. Coming out from the forest, she was on the path that her classmates took through the woods. Pedaling as fast as she could, she sped down the road. In the distance, she saw 3 figures. 2 of them were Ochako-chan and Tsu-chan. The other one was a girl in a school uniform, 2 green boxes strapped to her tights, utility belt around her waist with more green boxes, a weird scarf that had a toothy grin on it, and a black piped face mask. Around her shoulders were overall 3 cylinders that purpose remained unknown. In hand, the villainess held a bloodied knife. Get away from them! Momo screamed, gaining attention. Tsu-chan reacted instantly, pushing Ochako-chan out of the way and jumping back a bit. This allowed Momo to drop off her bike, sending it straight at the criminal. To her great surprise, the girl avoided it effortlessly. Yamamoto? What are you doing here? Ochako-chan asked, standing up. She had a wound on her left arm that bled slightly. Producing a bandage from her tight, she gave it to Tsu-chan. However, her eyes didn't leave villainous even for a second. I came here to help you. Aizawa-sensei, Izuku, Mei and Toshi are checking other places. She quickly informed them, creating a staff for herself. Yamamoto. 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 The girl muttered creepily, testing the sound of the nickname. I like it. I'm going to call you like that too. The criminal announced, pulling off her face mask, revealing a giant, toothy grin and her rosy cheeks. Despite how wrong it sounded, she didn't comment on it. She could tell that this girl was dangerous and would cut her to pieces if she wasn't careful. Hoping that first to strike was first to win, she moved forward, thrusting her staff at the villainess, who quickly sidestepped it. Pushing forward, Momo hit with well-calculated, vicious strikes that were always off by a few centimeters. Suddenly the criminal ducked low and pushed right into her guard. The knife went upward, hitting the plastic of her visor. Quickly thinking, she kneeled the girl, but the impact didn't feel as it should. The criminal did a backward somersault, putting the reasonable distance between them. Wow! You're vicious, Yamamoto. The villainess told her gleefully. You are trying very hard, almost as if you wanted to impress someone. Then she sniffed the air, her grin widening even more. You're in love. I can tell, you have the same smell around you as I. She said it in a low whisper. That crept the hell out of her. What was wrong with this girl? The crazed look in her eyes and that lovesick blush only added to the uneasiness she felt. Suddenly the villainess rushed forward, swinging with her knife at her. Momo moved to the side and used her elbow to strike her opponent. However, the girl just ducked a bit under it. The next thing that Momo felt was something piercing her arm. The villainess then pushed against her, trapping her against the tree. Looking down, she saw that the criminal held into one of those cylinders. From it, she spotted a see-through wire with something red pumping through it towards the back. Her blood. Using creation, Momo made a metal pole, destroying her shirt and pushing the crazy girl away from her. Oh. You didn't let me take much, Yamamoto. The villainess whined loudly and pouted at her. Suddenly the girl jumped back as Tsu-chan's tongue struck in the place where she just stood. Looking to the side, she saw her friend standing ready to fight. "You want to play too?" the criminal asked, jumping in the air, showing her joy. "I'd love to play with you too. We all can be such good friends. But I don't think I can play anymore. So until next time, bye-bye." The girl waved at them and jumped into the forest, quickly disappearing in the thicket. Momo allowed herself to take a deep breath. What was wrong with that girl? She was just so bizarre and weird. Was she mentally unstable? Possibly. She wasn't sure if she was supposed to chase after her or no. From the fight, she could clearly see that the villainess knew how to move around and fight well. Taking her down would be hard. Besides, her fat reserves weren't looking too good. "Yamamoto, are you okay?" Tsuchan asked, coming closer to her. "Yeah, I'm good," she replied, checking her arm. It bled a bit, but it wasn't anything too serious. "We should get back to everyone, we have a problem." Her teacher's voice cut her sentence. Judging from his tone, the things weren't looking too good. Shota flew through the skies as fast as he could. He passed through the clearing where Mandalay and Tiger fought with two villains. He had a passing thought of coming down and helping them, but the two were seasoned heroes and knew how to handle themselves. Besides, looking over his shoulder, he saw that Midoriya was going there. A small smirk made its way onto his lips. That damn problem child risked his freedom, technology and company to come and rescue them. Oh, he was sure that Yaoyorozu being here played the most significant part in that decision. However, he couldn't deny that the boy would be a brilliant hero. If he managed to escape from Japan, thus from that sleazebag of a prime minister's, he would make his dreams come true. Shota could only cheer on the boy and watch him excel in heroics. Flying above the route of the test of courage, he saw the clearing at which Ragdoll was supposed to be. However, what he saw froze the blood in his veins. There was no Ragdoll. Instead, he saw his students, Aoyama and Koda, running around, trying to dodge the attacks from the villain. The criminal itself was suspended above the ground, thanks to the long and shard blades growing from his teeth. He couldn't identify who it was, due to them wearing a black straitjacket that hid the face except for the mouth that was kept open by some clamps. It looked disgusting. Activating erasure, Shota swooped down from the skies. It seemed that while he couldn't erase already extended teeth, he could stop their movement. Twisting in the air, he delivered a vicious kick to the villain's face. The power behind his strike was enough to break some of the teeth and topple the criminal over. Deploying his wings again, he gracefully landed, between his students and villain. Needlessly to say that two boys were overjoyed to see him coming. Focusing on the enemy, Shota ran forward. The villain was now lying face down and could use his quirk, which was terrible news. That and he kept mumbling about meat in the creepiest way Shota had ever heard. The head of the villain tilted a bit and razor-sharp teeth shot in his general direction, destroying the ground on its way. Jumping a bit to the side, he continued sprinting. Using his capture weapon, he wrapped it over the criminal's body and threw him with all his might against the tree. The man yelled in pain, accompanied by another shout for meat. Now seeing his mouth, the deadly quirk was kept at bay. When he got closer, the villain swung his head, almost hitting him some of the still extended teeth. Clicking his tongue in displeasure, Shota searched for something within his field of vision that would help him somehow. Spotting a rather sizable rock, he used his bindings to bring it closer to him. It was heavy and would no doubt seriously hurt someone if it was thrown with a good amount of force. "Eat this, you freak," Shota mumbled, throwing the rock straight the criminal's mouth. It hit its mark, destroying the deadly blades. Running up, Shota grabbed the villain by the throat, squeezing it tightly to cut off the air. Additionally, he pounded the head against the trunk. Better be safe than sorry with this kind of batshit insane criminals. Only when he was sure that the villain was put out of commission, he stopped. Dreading it slightly, he undid the clamps and pulled off the hood, revealing a bald man in his 30s. He didn't look familiar to Shota. Tearing the hood off and finding another, this time smaller rock, he made a makeshift gag. While some of the teeth were absolutely broken, he didn't want to have any chances with the guy. Only when he secured the villain, he turned to his students. Both were obviously relieved that he took down the criminal, who tried to change them into shish kebab. "Are you two okay?" he asked, coming closer. They were a bit dirty but otherwise seems they're fine. "Oui, Musiezawa. Your dazzling display of skills truly saved us from our miserable fates," Aoyama replied with his usual dramatically posing. Koda just used sign language to reply. Releasing a sigh, he looked around for any sign of trouble. "Was there anyone else who went after you into the forest?" The tree line didn't exactly allow him to see inside the forest for any other students. Mouseear Shoji and Mouseear Tokoyami were right behind us. Aoyama replied in slight worry. Signaling at them to follow, they ran back on the route. Rather unsettling thoughts filled his mind. He wouldn't admit it out loud, but he was worried for his students. He got attached to them, which wasn't exactly ideal. Stupid feelings for anything that wasn't his husband and wife, cute cats, and his future children. He spotted Shoji, who hid behind a thick tree, and looked like he went through hell. The boy also saw them and quickly signaled to stop their movement. Doing precisely that, Shota looked around. He saw something in the deeps of the forest. A giant mass of black that kept swirling. Then a faint whimper reached his ears. Signaling to Aoyama and Kota to stay and hide, he quietly made his way toward Shoji. One of the boy's hands changed into a mouth and moved closer to his ear. A villain attacked us. Tokoyami got scared, and Dark Shadow went on the rampage. The student whispered to him. So that explained the looks. Peeking out from their hiding place, he saw a giant dark shadow. The quirk was larger than he ever remembered it to be. His gaze searched for Tokoyami. After a few seconds, he spotted the teen suspended in the air, writhing in pain as the mass of shadows embraced his body. Quickly using erasure, he instantly cut off the quirk, making Dark Shadow disappear back into the student's body. He kept his quirk activated. He stepped closer to kneeling Tokoyami and put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're okay now," Shota said reassuringly. The teen's breathing slowly regulated, and he nodded at him. Then he turned his head to the side. "I am sorry, Shoji. In my weakest moment, I allowed my darkness to swallow me. Please forgive me for that." He sounded frank and ashamed of himself. "Don't worry. It's okay now. I'm glad that nothing happened to you." The boy responded happily. Shota allowed a small smile to pass through his features. Standing up, he looked around, once again checking for any sign of trouble. He didn't saw any. "Listen up, we're going to move back to the cabin. Keep up the tempo and report anything suspicious." "Yes, sir." 3 voices answered him. "Wait." He clearly heard Shoji and Aoyama. Kota replied in a barely hearable whisper, but he still caught it. Snapping his head back, he only saw 3 of his students here. Looking beyond them, he cursed and quickly pressed his earpiece. "Everyone, we have a problem," he called, already opening his wings. "You're the Iron Man," the Stain wannabe shouted, pointing his finger in him accusingly. Izuku looked at the man, thinking from where the criminal could acquire his codename. During his internship, he had to give it to some police officers when he and Aizawa-san stopped crimes. But they usually didn't have much of the audience during it. 4 or 5 people at best. "You know him, Spinner?" the other villain asked, twisting his bulky weapon around. "Of course, Big Sis Magna. He's the one who killed Stain." The reptile replied, gleefully. "What? How did he know it?" This information was kept tightly under wraps. Unless there was a leak from the police side, no one should be able to obtain that knowledge. "You're a real hero, boy." Even Stain said it at his dying breath. The imposter added, grinning widely. "Who are you?" Tiger asked aggressively, ready to pound him into the ground. Getting out of his shock, he opened his faceplate and turned slightly towards the heroes. "Izuku Midoriya from UA High School. I and others came to help." He gazed at Mandalay and smiled lightly. "Your nephew is safe. He asked me to save you." The heroine relaxed a bit and sent him a grateful smile. A lone tear of happiness escaped from her eye. Snapping his faceplate back, he got ready for a fight. The first one to move was that Magna guy, girl. Just Magna. The criminal swung the chunky metal at him, but Izuku just answered with a dual repulsor blast, pushing the villain away. "I suggest you surrender. You two could barely keep up with 2 heroes." Izuku said plainly, trying to sound as intimidating as he could. "All fakes must be purged." Spinner yelled, rushing forward with his bizarre mass of swords. Izuku jumped back and fired repulsor blast to stagger the enemy. Tiger took a chance and unleashed a powerful downward strike. But before it could hit the mark, a blue aura enveloped the criminal and pulled him back. Looking to the site, he saw that Magna's weapon had a pinkish aura around it. Magnetism, his mind supplied him. Fortunately, it was useless against his suit. Mandalay ran after Magna, chasing the villain away with well-timed kicks and punches. Tiger swung his powerful limbs at Spinner, always missing just by a hair. Taking a chance, he flew up and moved to Pixie Bob. The wound on her forehead seemed rather deep. Taking hold of her, he made his way to the entrance of the clearing from the cabin side, away from any fight. Grabbing a bit of material from the skirt, he patched the wound to the best of his ability, hoping that it was enough. Turning around, he immediately flew up and supported the heroes with the precise blasts of his repulsors. He didn't want to get in their way, but he still wanted to help. Seeing that Spinner jumped a bit away, to escape from Tiger's rage-fueled rush, Izuku took a chance and fired a shockbug at the villain. Electricity coursed through his body, making him lose his footing and tremble on the ground. Using this, the hero moved in, hitting the criminal hard on the head. Changing his focus to Mandalay, he maneuvered behind Magna and using dual repulsor blast, he sent the villain straight to the incoming kick to the gut from the heroine, that downed the criminal. "Good assist, Iron Man," Tiger commented, twisting his hands around Spinner's body in a truly bizarre way. "Thank you," he responded with a happy note in his voice. Walking forward, he pointed his glove at Magna. "Now, be nice and tell us what you know," he ordered coldly. "Ah, that's not the way to ask a lady, young man," the villain responded with a huff. Izuku blinked, stupefied by what he just heard. Looking at Mandalay, he saw that the heroine wasn't faring any better. However, before he could continue the interrogation, his earpiece came to live. "Everyone, we have a problem," Aizawa-san called in distress. "One of the villains managed to capture Tokoyami. He may have other students with him. I'm chasing him. Requesting backup." Crap. Just when he thought that the work was over. "Negotiator here. I have 2 students with me, but they're in the safe part of the forest now. Coming to your position, Eraser," Toshi quickly replied. "This is Hawkeye. I and Puppy have a bunch of students with us. We need a minute or 2 to load them into Quinjet," May said, but her voice sounded somewhat strained, which worried him greatly. "Creati here. I have 2 students with me. They are safe and sound, moving back to the cabin. I'm following to your position." One of the villains went in that direction. Momo quickly added, sounding a bit out of breath. Looking around, he saw that Pussycats had it all under control. Standing up, he activated his repulsors and followed in the direction of Aizawa-san. "Iron Man here. I'm going to your position, Eraser." Pumping more power from the arc reactor, he sped up. Not even a minute later, he saw Aizawa-san flying a few paces behind a villain that was dressed in the orange coat with a huge, black top hat. The criminal was jumping from tree to tree with surprising agility, covering great distance with every leap. Before them was a clearing on which he spotted more villains. The same guy, who attacked the cabin, another male in a bodysuit and a girl about his age with some weird gear on her back. Diving down, Izuku sped past Aizawa-san and hit the villain, taking him off course, making him crash painfully against the ground. Landing quickly, he went to grab the criminal but had to dodge an attack from the guy in the bodysuit. "You're fast. So slow." The criminal screamed at him, swinging his measuring tape. The hit actually staggered him and chipped away some of his armor. Great, another insane guy. He tried to raise his hand to blast the guy away, but he had to give it to the villain. He was quick. One moment he was a few meters away, and next, he was almost at his face. Head-butting the guy, Izuku pushed his feet repulsors and hit the guy with his knee. Taking a moment to look around, he saw that Aizawa-san was keeping the villain with fire quirk at bay, along with that magician. Toshi also showed up, fighting off the villainess. "Eyes on me," his opponent screamed, making a jump kick. Sidestepping it, Izuku hit the guy square on the stomach, making him painfully fall. However, the criminal was almost instantly back on his feet, swinging with that tape at him as if it was a whip. Jumping up, he rose up and started showering the ground with his repulsors. It gave him some edge, but not that much. Suddenly, 4 black portals with a purple outline opened. Wait, weren't those from that guy from League of Villains? Kurogiri or something like that. He spotted that magician was about to pass through one of them. He couldn't allow it. There needed to be something he could do. "Toshi!" Izuku screamed, rising up his hand. "Blast at me." His friend put some distance between his opponent, lining perfectly with him. And between them was their target. "What? Are you insane?" the teen asked but rose his hand regardless. The fair question actually. "Yes. Go, go, go." Their blast collided in the middle, creating a massive explosion that rose a giant cloud of dirt. When it settled, he saw that the fire villain was lying on the ground. Aizawa-san actually dodged it despite the proximity. But where was the magician? Suddenly, a bright blue light shone, and the man in question popped out, absolutely unharmed. My, that was quite the explosion. Certainly, a great way to end the show," he said, bowing at them. "But we're going to take the prize," the villain added, pulling out 2 blue marbles from his pocket. Fortunately for them, Toshi's whip hit the guy across the face, making him drop the shiny marbles. But his mask also cracked, and from his mouth, 2 more marbles showed up. "Grab them," Izuku ordered, already diving down to the closest one. The criminal in the bodysuit also jumped after the same one. Thinking quickly, he released a bola from his thigh, which hit Guy's hands. Swooping the marble, Izuku kicked the man away, accidentally sending him through the portal. Looking up, he saw that Aizawa-san, Toshi and Fire Villain also held marbles. "Compress, release your quirk," the villain commanded in slight displeasure. The magician snapped his fingers, and blue light shone in his arm, revealing a twig? Gazing around, he saw that Eraser held another sprig. Toshi had a very confused Tokoyami-san. As for the Fire Villain, his hand was grasping around Ragdoll's throat. The heroine was unconscious and bled heavily from her head. "Could be better? We still have another brat at the base," the Fire Villain muttered, gazing at them with a smirk. "So long, heroes," he said as he crossed the warp gate that closed immediately after. He spotted the villainess, who ran straight at the remaining gate. He rose his hands, firing repulsors at her, but she skillfully dodged his shots. No. She was their only clue now as for where the hideout could be. The other criminal said something about another kid that they already had. Someone who needed to be saved. Just before the girl could cross the gate, Momo jumped out from the bushes, crashing at the villainess with her bike. The 2 of them rolled across the ground, his girlfriend coming on top. Without wasting any chances, she struck the girl across the temple. It looked like the criminal was knocked out cold. "Sir, the authorities arrived. Firefighters are trying to put out the fire. There are also some ambulances, but too little to transport every student." Alan's voice rung through his helmet. "May, take the students that you have to Urania. After that, land near the cabin and load others. We're going to transport them to a hospital," he ordered, opening his faceplate. "Roger, father," Puppy replied to him, which put a pit in his stomach. Did something happen to May? He hoped not. Turning around, Izuku saw the azure haze and thick clouds of black smoke. The raid was over, some villains were caught, all students were safe, even if some required medical attention. Only Ragdoll was taken away. Even when the cold calculation showed that they were winners, Izuku felt like they have lost. Izuku felt like punching something. A wall would do. Or his stomach. Or his face. Maybe that way, he could get rid of his stupidity. Yeah, not likely, but it wouldn't hurt too much to try. He gazed at the sleeping form of his beloved, pink-haired girlfriend, who lied on a hospital bed, a blood bag hooked up to her arm. Momo sat next to their girl, rubbing her thumb against May's palm. Despite her calm expression, he could clearly see worry lingering in her eyes. It was his fault. If he went there instead of May, then she wouldn't be here with a bullet hole in her leg. Toshi also would be able to come from this unscratched. Aizawa-san could turn off the villain's quirk and deal with the criminal before he could do anything. "Hey!" Momo called him, offering a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's okay. We have to get used to this kind of situations." A frown came over his face. "I don't want to get used to this," he replied with the rebellious voice of a child. Momo stood up from her stool and came over, sitting on his lap. Her arms snaked their way around his neck. A light peck settled on his forehead. His own arms wrapped around her waist almost instantly, holding her close. "I know, Izuku," she whispered, sighing a little. "I hate seeing either of you in a hospital, being hurt, while I'm okay." Her fingers entangled themselves with his curls. "Besides, look at how much good we did. As always, she had to be right, didn't she?" He couldn't deny it. Saving all students from the camp was a great achievement. After packing up all of the teens and Pixie Bob on Urania, they transported them to the nearby hospital. The gawked expressions of the doctors at the sight of the helicarrier and Quinjet typically would please him. But seeing as his girlfriend was bleeding to death, he just asked them to take care of her. Not kindly either. Seeing as most students didn't have serious injuries, mostly scrapes, they were quickly patched up. They were asked to stay, most likely for their parents or police. The ones affected by the gas were hooked onto 4 drops and gave MRI scans. Doctors still weren't sure when the teens would wake up. Recovery Girl also came to try using her quirk to see if it could help with the students' recovery. Unfortunately, there wasn't any sign of betterment. However, she swung by and used Heal on May. He felt like he should send the heroine some chocolates. He nuzzled himself closer into the crook of Momo's neck. It was over for now. Once Mei healed enough, they'd quickly board on Urania and move from Japan to get away from the mess that he got them into. A loud knock sounded, and the door opened. Through them stepped a man clothed in a long coat with a fedora hat. In his raised arm was a police badge. Of course, it wasn't over. She screwed up. Correction, she severely screwed up. How did she get caught? By being hit with an electric bicycle and getting hit across her temple. She usually would swiftly and effortlessly dodge it, thanks to her honed reflexes. But she got too comfy with downplaying her abilities, which in hindsight was a bad idea. Himiko didn't care about those losers from League. They could all die in a hitch for all she cared. However, she cared for her master. The man took her in and shaped her into who she was today. All by her wish, as she was the one who asked him to help her. She dreaded to think about who would she become if she didn't encounter her master. Most likely a loser wannabe villain like the rest of those suckers. So here she was, locked in an interrogation room, waiting for yet another cop to come and try to persuade her into telling them the location of the League's base. She wouldn't mind spilling the beans, but she was under a direct order to cooperate with them until said otherwise. The police tried everything. Bad cop, good cop, threatening, pleading, offering a great deal. However, Himiko refused to talk. Literally, she didn't utter a word. When presented with an opportunity, she took a pen and wrote a simple sentence, telling them about her conditions. Not that she believed that they would happen. The door opened, and she got ready to hear yet another wish-wash from the police that would make her vomit afterwards. Imagine her surprise, when through the entrance, stepped a teenager. She blinked, not believing her eyes. Black-green curly mess on top of the head? Check. Big, dark green eyes? Check. Diamond-shaped freckles on each cheek? Check and check. Slightly nerdy, but still cute features? Oh boy, definitively check. Apparently there was a god somewhere out there. Izuku. She said, grinning widely and giggling a bit at the end. She still needed to keep the charade of an insane girl. The teen sat across the table, glaring at her. Just for the record, from the professional side of it, I only agreed, because you're in the police custody. He stated coldly. That made sense. Himiko could only imagine how much trouble he had on his head right now, due to that foolish law. And on the personal side? She couldn't deny her own curiosity here. You stabbed my girlfriend. And my other girlfriend got shot by one of yours. Did the temperature in the room just drop a few degrees from how cold his voice sounded? She held back a wince. Not because she felt bad for stabbing Yamamo, they were fighting, so all was fair. No, her problem laid elsewhere. Hearing her crush saying that he was in a relationship with not one, but two girls, really stung. She didn't know when the simple interest in him changed into that sweet, warm feeling that bubbled in her chest every time the object of her affection was mentioned. It was stupid and irrational to have a crush on someone that she had never met before. But wasn't love supposed to be silly and ridiculous in the first place? Any chance for a room for one more? She asked hopefully, not sure if it was herself or her facade speaking. Izuku just released a very unamused snort. Where's the League hideout? Oh, you already want to be done? She questioned, pouting lightly. They just met. She needed to learn something more about him. How about it? You answer a question of mine, then I answer one of yours. Fair trade, right? She stated gleefully. He measured her with his eyes, nibbling on his lip. Damn, that looked hot. Shoot. He said after a few seconds. Doesn't that quirkless hero Ben irritate you? She asked, tilting her head to the side. His brow quirked ever so slightly, and his features changed a bit, giving her a weird look. Looks like he didn't expect that one from her. Adopting a more thoughtful expression, his lids closed slightly, yet still showed his saddened eyes. Of course, it irritates me. He replied after a moment, his voice sounded rather pretentious. Those bastards took away my chance at being a hero in my motherland. Not only mine. I can't even imagine how many quirkless kids somewhere out there that will be disheartened by it, or those that will be born in the future, where their dreams got destroyed before even existing. It's like saying that only quirks matter in our society. He shook his head, snarling in disgust. While quirks are undoubtedly a very noticeable feature, they don't define a person. Someone with a weak quirk can be a great person, and someone with a powerful quirk can be a horrible one. Our lives, our identities depend from many more factors. Parents, family, environment, personal likes and dislikes, and so on. Suddenly, he blinked and scratched his cheek, a small blush setting on his face, making him even more adorable. Sorry, I tend to ramble. I guess what I'm trying to say is that while it surely bothers me, I won't allow them to dictate my worth based on their twisted beliefs. He ended with a small, graceful smile. Himiko wasn't just amazed. She was blown away. The words he spoke came straight from the heart. At first, she expected some outrage or despair from him, calling the world for its injustice. She didn't think, even for a split second, that he would be so pure, so open about it, so, like her master. She closed her jaw that opened during his rant. So you're saying that even a villain like me could be someone significant? Not that she ever doubted her self-worth, she just wanted to dig further to learn more about her crush. Yes, even the pettiest criminal can create something great. He answered truthfully. A second later, his gaze hardened yet again. Now, where's League's hideout? Right, they still needed to go through that. Let's see, they were in Tokyo, so. They're not far, but also not close. She told him, giggling a little. No one said that she needed to give a direct answer. He shot her a dirty look but seemed to accept her response. Standing up from his chair, he moved to the door. Wait. She called, making him stop, right before passing the doorstep. What's a chance for a date? She asked, grinning widely. Her reply was in from of a door closed with a bang. Well, can't blame the girl for trying, right? Nizu looked around the meeting room and the police station before the meeting itself started. Best Jeanist, Gang Orca and Edshot talked among themselves at one end of the table. Next to them, Kan-san looked over some papers with Tsukachi-san. Finally, the elephant in the room, Endeavor. The man sat on his chair with arms folded on his chest, glaring ahead of him. The meeting purpose was to discuss their plan of action against the League of Villains. They couldn't allow Ragdoll and the unknown teen, that the villain somehow caught, remain in their grasp. Of course, if the suspicions about who was the mastermind behind the group proved right, then they could face a severe problem. Where's All Might? Endeavor all but demanded to know. He's downstairs, trying to get information from the villainess captured at the camp. Tsukachi-san replied, entirely lying to the hero. They needed Yagi-san to save his time limit before the raid against the villains began. That is if they could figure out where the hideout was. And seeing as they had no clue at all, their chances weren't the greatest. Suddenly the door opened and through them walked Aizawa-san, who still had Night Raven strapped to his back. Following him, young Shinso stepped inside, keeping the doors open for young Yaoyorozu who supported young Hatsune. The girl had a crutch in her left hand, avoiding putting all and any pressure in her injured leg. Nizu felt a bit of guilt for what had happened to his student. He kind of regretted not stopping them from going to help. But at the same time, he knew that consequences could be so much more severe if he did. Finally, young Midoriya walked inside with an expression that told him that the boy was ready for war. What are you doing here? Endeavor barked, standing from his place, glaring at the boy. The student's response was silence. He just moved to the table and looked at the map that was laying on it. The look in his eyes showed that young Midoriya was deep in thought. I asked you a question. The flame hero yelled, striking his fist against the table. And shouldn't you be arrested? You broke the law, boy. Additionally, being here makes that the second time. The man added in a disgustingly smug tone. I can walk out, but when the press asks why you couldn't rescue a fellow heroine and an unnamed teen, I won't hesitate to tell them that you refused my help due to your overgrown ego. Young Midoriya replied calmly, taking the pen and using it as a ruler. What was he measuring with it? His remark only added fuel to the fire, angering Endeavor even more. Now not only the man's flames but also his face were bright red in color. Are you perhaps saying that you know where they are? Tsukachi-san asked, full of hope. Nope, but I am the only one with an idea and resources to find them. The teen replied, his eyes still glued to the map. We don't need your help, boy. Walk out and I may not put a lawsuit against you. Endeavor growled with the edge in his voice. Before Nizu could step in, young Midoriya released a sinister-sounding chuckle and shook his head in amusement as if he heard a good joke. You do that, and my mom will take it to the highest court in less than a day. The student replied, smirking at the hero, who finally backed off. Nizu smiled at that. He was well aware of just how good Inko Midoriya was as a lawyer. Despite starting the profession late, she quickly proved to be one of the best. As far as he knew, the woman never lost a case, even defending those that seemed to be absolutely hopeless to win. I think that adding Midoriya-kun will help us rescue the taken ones. Best Jeanist said suddenly, gaining a nod from Edshot. I second that. Gang Orca added, looking at the Endeavor with a challenging gaze. Endeavor. Tsukachi-san called with an edge in his voice, staring at the hero. If you have any problem with this, the door is open. The flame hero just sat there trying to burn a hole through everyone's heads with his eyes. While I see the point of adding Genius Boy, why are the rest here? Kansan questioned, pointing at the other students. We're a package deal. Young Shinso's reply was accompanied by the girls' nods and smiles. Nizu could swear that he saw a tiny smirk stretch Aizawa-san's lips. Young Midoriya, what is your plan? He asked, smiling lightly. He was sure that the boy had already something good cooked up. The teen stroked his chin and looked around the room. First, I want to determine at some things. Can we have access to Japanese air zone without restraints? What's the maximum amount of heroes we can have without raising suspicion? During special actions with multiple heroes on board, almost all restraints are lifted, so we can use the sky. Edshot replied calmly. As for more heroes, I'd say about 4 more could be added. Best Jeanist added confidently. Young Midoriya nodded at that, as he marked a circle around Tokyo on the map that had a few centimeters in diameter. Okay, here's what we're going to do. The boy put on an earpiece and turned his head to him. Principal, I need pilots. I don't care if they are military, civilian, or a hobbyist. As long as they can communicate with each other and can operate a computer, they're good to go. He nodded at the demand. It wouldn't be a piece of cake, but Nizu would do his best to find the most suitable ones. How many do we need? And what for? At least 15. 25 would be a perfect number. We're going to make Urania our operation center. With it, we can quickly cover great distances and remain undetected high in the sky from the public eye. The student turned towards his girlfriends. May, I want you to write a localization program. Alan will help you do it. Momo, as much as I hate to do it, we need you to be a living factory. Alan is going to provide you with a schematic. Both girls nodded and gave him a mock salute. I don't follow. Kansan whispered, looking at the students weirdly. You're not the only one. Aizawa-san replied, pointing with his head at the other heroes, who looked like they tried to wrap their heads around what was being said. Problem child, we are not mind readers. Young Midoriya blinked at them and released a nervous chuckle. Sorry. What we're going to do is to triangulate the position of the villains, using Kurojire's quirk energy signature. That's a brilliant plan, young Midoriya. Nizu commented, smiling brightly. Even he didn't think about using the enemy's escape tool against them. And how are you going to get it, boy? Endeavor rudely asked. We already have it. Before the attack at the USJ, May and I had built a device that analyzed Kurojire's energy signature and linked it to the school scanners. That way we'd be immediately alerted when he opened his portal on the school's ground. The teen swiftly replied. While it seems good, we have a whole of Japan to search. Gang Orca stated in worry. Actually, no. We only need to check the area that I've circulated on the map. The boy said, tapping his finger on the map. I've seen All Might before coming here. He told me that he managed to get that clue from the villainess in custody. Great cover-up, young Midoriya. Nizu would make sure to give the teen praise later. Coming back to the topic, Momo is going to produce us the special sensors that I, Toshi and Aizawa-san will place at the multiple telecommunication towers and satellites. After that, we're going to send a unique signal, which in turn will show us every place where Kurojire opened his portals. The site with the strongest one will surely be their hideout. In the case of there being more than one location, we would have to gamble a bit, but I hope that we won't need to stretch our forces too thin. The student explained further, gaining the nods and impressed looks at his deep thinking. Shouldn't we use some of the police force to help us with placing the sensors? It would speed up the process. Young Yayorozu asked, looking at her boyfriend. Young Midoriya shook his head. We're going to need quite a lot of them, and while it surely would speed up the process, it would also attract the media. I doubt that the media would immediately release information. Kansan stated, stroking his chin. A frown came over Teen's features as he gazed back at the map. It's only my speculation, but I think that the League may have some connections with media moguls. The boy said dreadfully. Are you perhaps referring to the latest video about the hero industry? Best Jeanist questioned. The timing of it and positive reaction of many media sites are too convenient to not to take it into account. Young Shinso stated, peeking at young Midoriya, who nodded. Right, Urania is above us, and Puppy is bringing the Quinjet to transport us to it. Let us continue on the board if it's okay with everyone. the boy said, looking around the room. All of the heroes, except for Endeavor and the detective, rose up and followed to the door. From their expressions, Nizu could clearly see that all of them were positively pleased with the student's attitude and strategy. He would even dare to say that they're hugely impressed with it. Not that he could blame them, that was also his first reaction when he met the teen. Hopping down from his seat, he took the tablet in front of him into his paws and looked at it, following others to the rooftop. Opening the files, he selected the list of villains that took part in the raid. Thanks to the database, the police was able to identify the criminals. All but one. His eyes lingered a bit longer on that face. Nizu couldn't help but feel ashamed that due to his actions, Tuya Todoroki was a villain now. When Katsuki walked right through a freaking portal that the warp shitstain opened on his way and got caught in chains, he expected something else. Like for those League of Suckers, or whatever their name was, to demand a ransom for him. Or try to make him talk about whatever shit they wanted. But life apparently was full of fucking surprises. So here he was, gawking at Handjob, trying to comprehend what kind of drugs the sucker took to think about this offer with his peanut brain. Blinking away his bewilderment, he scowled lightly. "Excuse me?" Katsuki asked, absolutely stupefied, not really sure where this conversation was going. "Join us," Handjob said once again with the same seriousness as earlier. Usually, Katsuki would start swearing, letting the shitty villain know what exactly he thought about it. But considering that lately, he had some terrible days, he did something else. He laughed long and hard, pulling all of the restraints around his body and rattling the chains from the fucking steel gloves around his hands. This was one of the best jokes that he had ever heard in his life. Whipping a lone tear with his shoulder and letting out a few more chuckles, he looked ahead, straight into Handyman eyes. "Fuck. No," he said slowly, his happy facade dropping. An irritated groan from Handjob was music to his ears. Why the fuck did this side character thought that he, Katsuki Bakugo, would lower himself to the fucks like him? Something must have been wrong in his head. He wasn't a freaking villain, nor he would ever become one. The fucking slip-up at the worthless school was nothing but a minor setback in his plans. Sure, not ending UA's hero course was humiliating to him. However, he still could take that freaking government test to get his license. He could be a hero, showing everyone that his strength mattered the most. Chicken Wings was top 3, and he didn't finish UA, so there was a path for him. A path where he was going to prove All Might wrong and destroy fucking Deku. "I see that you're having trouble, Tamura," a voice out of nowhere said, making the hair in the back of his neck stand. Katsuki wasn't scared because of the sudden voice. No, he was scared of the voice itself. It was rather quiet with heavy wheezing in it. But the power in it, those precisely hit notes, that firm articulation. Despite not wanting to admit it, the voice made him feel like some endangered animal that was pushed into a corner, with a predator from the top of the food chain before him. His fight or flight instincts screamed at him, begging him to get the fuck away from here. As far as he only could. "Katsuki Bakugo," the voice said, greeting him with another wave of terror. "We finally get to meet. It's a great joy for me," the man said happily. Swallowing his saliva with great difficulty and steeling his nerves, Katsuki looked ahead at the old laptop with "voice only" on the screen. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" he asked, trying to sound like he didn't want to run away from there. "Ah, where are my manners? You may call me All for One." The man stated it like it would explain everything. "As for what I want from you, I want to talk about your future, young Bakugo." Tashinori looked ahead, channeling every ounce his hatred at the symbol of evil, who once again stood on the battleground against him. All of it was going fine. Heroes assembled at the street at which the bar was located. He destroyed the wall with a punch, Kamui Woods bounded the villains with his quirk, Gran Torino knocked Dabi out cold, and Edge Shot anticipated Kurogyri. The other team, at the abandoned warehouse, moved before them, taking out the Nomus in case the League wanted to use them. And to his giant surprise, there was also young Bakugo, sitting on the chair with his head lowered. He was about to move to the ex-student, getting him away from danger. But some kind of warping quirk took the teen and members of League away, leaving them some Nomus as obstacles. Hearing through his earpiece a call for backup from the warehouse, he immediately moved there, hoping that other heroes would be able to take care of those beasts. Pushing his body to its limits, he arriving shortly at the destroyed warehouse surrounded by many buildings in ruin. The team of downed heroes was here. The League was here. All for One was here too, matching his punch with his own, pushing him away. And here they were glaring at each other like in some kind of a standoff from the westerns. Toshinori couldn't see his arch-nemesis' face due to that black, skull-shaped mask with pipes, but he could bet his money that the bastard was evilly grinning at him. "You seem a bit out of shape, All Might. You're late by 2 seconds. The glee in the man's voice only irked him more. "Your time ends here, All for One." All Might shouted loudly, clenching his fists harder. "I'm going to get rid of you for sure. Your obsession for world domination is going with you to Tartarus." His answer came in the form of howling, amused laughter that creeped him out. All for One put a hand on his chest and shifted his posture a little, shaking his head in apparent entertainment. "You think that I did all of this to sate my greed? To stroke my ego?" the man asked, ridiculing him with his tone. "You fool, you know nothing about this world. There are factions that have been with us before the dawn of quirks, patiently waiting and planning for the right moment to make their plans come into fruition. Some of them may even be older than humanity itself. And soon they will finally step into the light." All for One changed his voice to grimmer one, causing a shiver to course through Toshinori's body. "The world idiotically has been playing cops and robbers for decades, when the real enemy, bloodthirsty barbarians, are coming to our doors. You and your predecessors stopped me time and time again, pushing our world closer to the very edge of the abyss. When your so-called peace and quirk society finally crumble like a castle of cards that it is, you'll understand just how wrong you were in trying to stop me. Only those who can understand the reality will be capable of fighting back and protecting our planet. The ones like Izuku Midoriya." Toshinori tried to wrap his head around the nearly maniacal rant. He knew that the man couldn't be trusted with his words, but something told him that All for One was almost scared. Which was ridiculous. However, what does young Midoriya has to do with this? All Might asked, scowling a little. If that monster was going to do anything to the boy, he would smash his nemesis into outer space. "Oh, everything," the man replied with a short chuckle. "The boy became a spark for change in our society. Due to his actions, the dirty secrets and true nature of our leaders and heroes come out. And I'm sure that he's going to become a significant factor in the future. It'd be amusing to see all those heroes kneeling before him, begging for his guidance in the times of need. From the quirkless boy that they all scorned, admitting that he is indeed one of the greatest minds that were born." The strange glee in All for One's voice made a pit in Toshinori's stomach. "It's interesting, isn't it? For a seemingly powerless boy to hold that much power. He's going to be a wonderful hero one day, right All Might?" Once again, he couldn't understand where the man was coming. Why did it sound like young Midoriya was supposed to be some kind of a savior of the world? "I don't know what is going through that depraved mind of yours. But as much as it pains me, I have to agree with you. Young Midoriya is going to be a great hero." Toshinori replied with a bright smile. "Even if he doesn't have a quirk? Even if all he has is his mind?" All for One pushed forward with a weird interest in his voice. "Those things don't matter. A just heart and strong will is everything one needs to become an extraordinary hero." All Might replied with a firm conviction. The man chuckled darkly to himself. "I hear you loud and clear. But did you, young Bakugo?" All for One asked, stepping to the side, showing the kidnapped teen behind him, and wiping the smile from Toshinori's face. Crap, he had almost forgotten about the captured teen. Why did they take him in the first place? Were they trying to brainwash the poor boy into joining them? He couldn't allow that. He needed to save young Bakugo. But how? All for One would react to all and any. The teen started moving toward him. And his arch-nemesis did nothing to stop it. This was his chance. He needed to grab the boy and take him away, so he can go all out against this ancient monster. He sped forward when young Bakugo was only a few meters away from him. His hand almost secured the outstretched arm of the student. Then a sudden wave of heat and defying shockwave hit him, pushing him away. Toshinori looked up, not understanding what had happened. A small wisp of smoke was coming from young Bakugo's palm. The teen himself was looking at him with a blank face and broken gaze. He could clearly see emotions swirling in the red orbs. Confusion, anger, despair, betrayal. "Ah, I see that you finally made your decision, young Bakugo," All for One said, stepping next to the boy. "What did you do to him?" Toshinori asked through his teeth. "That's what's so beautiful about it. I did nothing," the man replied, raising his arm to the side in a welcoming gesture. "You and society did it. You're the one responsible for breaking this fine, young man. I just had to show him the ugliness of this world." Toshinori watched how the teen moved to stand beside the rest of the league. How they welcomed him like he was one of them. It was so wrong. He didn't know what exactly he did wrong, but All Might would be damned if he didn't save him. But saving meant going through All for One. And that itself posed a significant challenge. If the rest of the League were to support the monster, then he'd be hard-pressed. Additionally, the injured heroes still were here, and it was plausible that some civilians could may be in the destroyed buildings. Suddenly, a familiar tune started playing above him. Snapping his head up, he saw a group of drones. The same ones young Midoriya and young Hatsune made. It was from before Quirks. Toshinori heard it a few times in America, during rock festivals. A giant grin plastered on his face. The cavalry was coming. Since the beginning of the rescue operation, Izuku along with his girlfriends and friends stayed in the command room in Urania. Through the multiple screens, they all watched how it advanced, thanks to surveillance drones that they deployed. He made a deal with Tsukachi-san. For letting the police and heroes use Urania and some of his tech, they wouldn't reveal his involvement in the operation. Due to this, he couldn't stay on the bridge. But he believed that Nizu, Alan and Puppy were enough to help all of those pilots using his tech. However, the heck? Toshi shouted, pointing at the screen. Language. Momo said, but she was too caught up in what was happening. On the monitor, they all saw how the warehouse basically exploded, destroying every building in the close vicinity. All of the heroes, even the enormous Mount Lady, was blown away by the explosion. And the cause of it appeared to be a man with a mask and suit? Izuku wasn't sure, but if he had to guess, then only one name came to his mind. All for One. All Might's arch-nemesis. Of course, the number one hero statement proved him right. The things weren't looking too good for them. If the two were to fight, the chances of someone being caught in collateral damage was massive. Mostly because All for One wouldn't care about destroying the city, and everyone around it. Hey, isn't that Pomeranian? May asked, zooming on the screen. Snapping his gaze back to the monitor, Izuku saw the blonde menace right behind the arch-villain. Now, he wasn't fond of the boy thanks to their shared history and what Firecracker almost did to his beloved Momo. However, that wasn't an excuse to leave him in the hands of villains. But that would mean getting involved in official hero business, thus giving a real excuse for Toriki and Burning Trash Can to send him to court. As much as it pained him, he would have to sit that one through. Oh, no. The faint voice of his taller girl and a gasp brought him out of his thoughts. On the side screen, he saw the feed from a drone. It was inside a downed building, showing the inside of an apartment. With a family inside. Looking at the others, he saw that all of them were trying very hard to stay put. The muscles in his legs were begging him to stand up and run to the armory. He and Toshi still were in their flight suits, so they could be there in no time. So, what do we do? Toshi asked pensively, looking at him. Turning to his friend, he saw the look in his eyes. The need to go out there, to help those people. To be the hero he was meant to be. Shifting his gaze at his girls, he saw the exact same look. Releasing a sigh, he stood up, making his choice. He would face the consequences later. Smiling lightly at them, he said, "Let's go. It's not like we're about to do something irrational." They chuckled at his analogy and followed him to the doors. However, before they could cross the entrance, they came face to face with the large body of Gang Orca. The hero was chosen to be on standby, so he can join the action whenever it was necessary. Izuku suspected that Orca also had another job, making sure that he and the rest of them don't jump into the fray. Which if it was true, would surely prove to be a problem. Excuse you, Toshi asked, chuckling awkwardly. We need. The hero started, before his body froze. Hearing a sharp hiss, Izuku turned to the side and saw his friend grasping his head in pain, squeezing his eyes shut. The teen must have used his quirk on the hero to make way for them. But it seemed to backfire. Before he could analyze it further, he saw Nizu jump out from behind the orca with a smug face. My, so eager for action. The principal stated happily, taping the hero's leg, breaking the hold of mind control. You're going down there, right? It sounded closer to the statement than a question. There are people trapped inside buildings. Momo replied with a slight edge to her voice. That just gives us more reason to send you down there. Orca said, flexing his neck. Hey! You won't hold us here, when? May started accusingly but stopped suddenly and blinked. Say what now? We need you to help us down there. All Might is going to have his hands full with the League's leader, and we don't have enough manpower to deal with the rest of the members, and save all of those trapped people. Nizu explained, already walking with them towards the armory. Izuku smirked a little eyeing the principal. You know that you're breaking the law, allowing a quirkless individual to take part in hero work. Nizu released a curt laugh and grinned at him. Then I hope that we share the bench during the lawsuit. He snorted at the remark and shook his head in amusement. But quickly got rid of it. He needed to get his head in the game. Momo, Mei and Gang Orca go into the Quinjet, start rescue operations. Toshi and I are going to keep the League at bay. He ordered, gaining nods of approval. Splitting up, and contacting with Alan to get ready the Mamps, asking to swap something important in his suit, Izuku and Toshi entered the armory. The room was spacious, being close to the largest on the ship. On one side of the wall was a holotable and workbenches, along with rows of crafting tools and supplies. On the other side of the room were all gadgets, such as Mei's arrows, both versions of the PM 2.0, sound gun and many more. Ahead from the entrance were two half-oval, lighted-up spots with holograms in them, showing which armor was currently loaded up. As for the suits, they were held in an adjacent room for the mechanism to quickly swap them if the need arose. The mobile armor mounting platforms could be used stationary, like they were about to do, or could be sent to target location to deliver the suit for them. Pulling the hood over his head, Izuku stepped into his platform and took a relaxed pose. As the mechanism closed the metal door, his feet were enveloped in green boots. From the sides and top, small windows opened, mechanical arms carrying parts of his armor, pushed them into the place and snapped the locks shut. When his helmet was added, and faceplate closed, the floor of the platform opened, dropping him down to the deployed platform. In it, Izuku looked to the side and saw Toshi right next to him. Under them were the lights of Yokohama, which from their perspective looked like numerous points of the ground. Guess that's what happens when you're almost 20 kilometers above ground. Nodding to him, he jumped from the platform and ignited his repulsors to full, his friend flying right after him. "We're right behind you, boys." Mei's voice cut through the comms. On a side note, the whale man looks like he's about to barf. His girl stated bluntly. "Killer whales aren't supposed to fly, you know?" Orcas replied, although his voice sounded rather weak. "You can argue about it later." Izuku said, looking at the feeds from the drones. All Might was fighting, but he wasn't fighting like he usually did. Most likely due to Bakugo being there. "Nizu, move Urania closer to the ground. You want to intimidate the enemy with your ship? What an ingenious idea." The principal comment was accompanied by a short, insane chuckle. Well, if that worked, then it would be nice. However, he was bringing his air cruiser closer for another reason. When they finally arrived at the destroyed ward, Izuku saw All Might breaking through a wall of azure fire, with his arm pulled back. The skyscraper leveling smash that was unleashed right in the center of the League got caught into the bulked-up arm of All for One. Despite it, the wind pressure from the attack blew away the villains and Bakugo back. To his great surprise and confusion, Pomeranian shot forward, settling an explosion right into the number one's face, knocking the hero back just a tiny bit. Was Bakugo a villain now? It seemed so. His bully, who wanted to be nothing more than a hero for fame and glory, became a criminal. "Deku!" Firecracker screamed at him, launching himself into the air, with a bloodthirsty grin plastered on his face. Thinking quickly, Izuku moved a little to the side at the last second and brought his elbow to the blonde menace's back, pushing the teen back to the ground. "I'm going to chase them away from the downed heroes," Toshi told him, already flying at the villains, unleashing a volley of bullets. The Quinjet flew past him and stopped near the remains of the warehouse. Before it could even lower itself, the back door opened, and Gang Orca jumped down, running up to his fellow companions. Snapping his gaze back to All Might, he saw that the League's leader was running at him from behind. Flying down, Izuku shot his repulsors at the man, stopping his advance. Hovering a few meters above the ground, he pointed his hands at Shigaraki. "You won't get past me," he stated firmly, already marking the points at the villain's body. "Move! I finally have an occasion to get rid of that trash." The man shouted at him, glaring from behind the hand on his face. "I need to help Sensei." "Yeah, I don't particularly care," Izuku replied nonchalantly. Parts on his shoulders opened, and two objects shot forward at the criminal. He skillfully dodged the first one, but the second nailed its mark, snapping tightly around the villain's wrist. A few seconds later, a shining dome sprung around the leader's hand, completely enclosing it. "This is nothing." Shigaraki barked and slapped his hand at the device. Only for nothing to happen. "What the hell? What did you do?" The villain gazed at him with a burning hatred. "A lesson of chemistry for you. That one is made from lead." And no matter how much it decays, lead always stays the same. Izuku replied smugly, smirking a tiny bit behind the faceplate. He developed that one having Shigaraki in mind. He was going to give them to the police after the capture, to ensure that the criminal was as harmless as one could be, but it seemed like he got to use that fantastic baby. A loud growl came from behind, and a moment later, an explosion hit his back, pushing him from the sky onto the ground. Landing painfully on the debris, he immediately had to dodge a wild swipe from Shigaraki, whose fingers almost touched his helmet. Twisting his palm, he fired a blast at the criminal, creating some distance between them. Not feeling comfortable on the ground, once again Izuku shot up, only to be tackled in the air by a super angry Bakugo. "It's all your fault." The Pomeranian screamed at him, settled an explosion on his abdomen. The wind was knocked from his lungs as his body was launched higher in the air. Getting control over his flight back, Izuku looked ahead and saw that Firecracker was speeding at him like a rocket missile. Having enough, he unleashed a double blast, knocking the blonde menace down a bit. Flying up to the teen, Izuku delivered a vicious haymaker to Bakugo's jaw, completely crashing the boy on the ground. However, before he could make sure that the Pomeranian stayed down, a gray liquid enveloped his body, making him vanish. "Go to the warehouse," Toshi told him, panting a little. Flying in that direction, Izuku landed right beside All Might and his friend. Ahead of them were the remaining members of the League of Villains, Bakugo and All for One, who stood at the center, just 2 steps before his followers. Even in my wildest imagination, I couldn't foresee that things would go this way. The symbol of evil stated, laughing a little. His voice making goosebumps on Izuku's skin. "Your rule of terror ends today. Neither you or your league will escape justice." All Might called, tightening his fist. All for One shook his head in the evident amusement. "Once again, you're mistaken," the villain said as black tendrils shoot out from his fingers, stabbing Kurogiri on his chest. A giant warp gate opened behind them. "Go, Tamura. You have your league. All you need to do is to try again," the man said in an almost fatherly voice. "Sensei, I can't. With us, you can win here," Shigaraki pleaded, stepping a bit closer. "Oh, don't worry, Tamura. I'm not alone," All for One said darkly, looking at them. Numerous more warp gates opened around them in rapid succession. Through them, Nomas of various sizes and colors popped out, screeching at them and flexing their bodies. "Oh, shit," Toshi said wryly. Izuku couldn't agree more. Things weren't looking too good for them. Just before he could do or say anything, a powerful blast from All for One pushed him, his friend and All Might back. The same shockwave knocked the League's members through the warp gate. Yet before they completely vanished, Izuku caught Bakugo's crimson orbs glaring at him as if they said that this wasn't over. But now he didn't have time to ponder about that. He was stuck with a bunch of mindless, genetic experiments and one of the most dangerous beings on the planet. Checking on his map, he saw that his girls were far enough for them to not get caught in the fight. Surely they could use Orca's power to get rid of the monsters, but right now the rescue of the civilians in the rubbles was more critical. "Ah, so this is your new creation, Izuku Midoriya," All for One called across the battlefield with awe. Turning around, he saw Urania lowering itself to about 100 meters above the ground. The lights from the aircraft illuminated the field. Looks like it was finally time to use his other new baby. But he couldn't risk it being taken down by the symbol of evil. They needed a good distraction. "Puppy, fetch your dad a Nimso," Izuku ordered, rising up. "Toshi, occupy the enemy boss for a few seconds. But don't use your quirk on him. You may get a worse headache than with Orca." "Wait. No, I must." All Might opposed this idea just as strong as he punched the nearest Nomu. "Shut it, All Might." Wow, did he just bossed around to the #1 hero? Yes, he did. "Sir, you know that Nimso is an equivalent with bringing a bazooka to a knife fight?" Alan sassed him but displayed the process nonetheless. "They have their own bazookas," Toshi yelled through comms. "Give me some juice on him, boss." "Well, his quirk can steal other people's powers, he's over 200 years old." "He is what?" Momo asked in shock, apparently listening to what he was saying. "Has a twisted sense of humor and is rotten to the core." Izuku finished, hovering above the battlefield. "Any second now?" His friend stopped a few meters before All for One and looked at the villain. Finally, he tipped his head to the side. "Huh, so that's how you end up after 200 years of being alone," the teen said, pointing at the enlarged, grotesque arm of the villain. "Excuse me?" All for One's voice somehow got caught, his tone signaling that the criminal was absolutely lost. The maniacal laughter of Mei and Nizu cut through the comms, along with Momo's scolding. Izuku himself could barely restrain himself from joining his girlfriend and the principal. Leave it to Toshi to do something like that in the direst of moments. A loud clang rung above him. Looking up, he saw that the bottom of Urania opened, releasing a green-gold, giant device. It activated almost immediately, turning on its repulsors and coming to him fast. 2 larger parts and few smaller detached themselves from it and shifted in the air. His legs and lower back were enveloped in one of the bigger pieces, mechanism snapping shut around him. Cutting off the repulsors at his feet, Izuku lowered to the ground, landing with a small bang. Another considerable part wrapped itself on his shoulders and pulled up to his chest. The smaller ones followed to his arms and head, completing the new armor. His display changed from usual green HUD to a bright orange one, signaling to him that everything secured, online, and Puppy was connected. All right? Stand down. Izuku shouted, his voice carrying through the battlefield thanks to the rest of the Nimso system that hovered a bit behind him and drones. All Nomas snapped their heads at him. The beasts looked like they were ready to fight him. Well, so was he. 2 monsters jumped at him, both had a considerable muscle mass. But they still were smaller than his armor. Raising his arms, Izuku fired a powerful repulsor blast at one of them, driving it away. He caught the other in the air and drove it down to the ground, making a small pit. Quickly standing up, he saw another one approaching him fastly. A heavy haymaker to its head launched it across the field, right under Toshi's whips. Izuku? What is that? Momo asked him with awe. She must have seen the display of power. Nimso. Nomu Iron Man suppression over armor. He replied proudly, knocking another beast down. And where is mine? His friend asked somewhat sharply, waving around what seemed to be a bunch of flexible steel spikes coming from one of the monster's back. Izuku chuckled to himself as he released a steady beam from his hands, knocking many of the beasts down. Be a good boy, and you may get one for Christmas. Toshi flew next to him, unleashing his whips at a green Nomu with one arm and a destroyed left side. Dear Santa Izuku, for my present, I want a massive suit of utter destruction, so I can punch all of these creepy monsters into next week. Boys, we could use a bit of help over here. Mei told them quickly. Looking over the Quinjet's location, he saw that a small group of Nomas was closing on them. They most likely got blown away, due to the crazy shockwaves that All Might's and All for One's punches created. He couldn't risk potentially catching his girls, Orca and civilians in his repulsor's blast. The repulsors in Nimso were so much more powerful, not only due to the size of the device, but also thanks to the numerous arc reactors implanted in the suit. Running up a little, he used his repulsors to get a bit of a speed boost. Getting close, he swatted away one of the Nomas with his arm. Quickly grabbing the 2 others, he banged their heads together and threw them away. Turning to the side, he was met with a fist to the helmet that staggered him a little, but other than that he was fine. Looking ahead, he saw a tall, bulky, dark-skinned Nomu. It reminded him a little of the monster from USJ, but this one didn't have a beak and had 4 arms. The beast roared at him and flexed its body, showcasing the muscles. Izuku straightened himself and looked down upon his enemy. Although this Nomu was over 2 meters tall, Nimso was still bigger. The monster rushed at him, closing the distance almost instantly. It swung the right set of arms at him, hitting on his shoulder and torso, pushing him a little to the side. Before the next attack came, Izuku delivered a powerful jab to the creature's head, gaining a small window. Raising his right arm, the fist retracted into the forearm. Swinging at the beast, the fist sprung back at the last moment, delivering the more powerful hit thanks to the extra force the mechanism provided. His attack downed the monster, but it wasn't enough. Grabbing it by the face, Izuku threw it in the air and once again prepared his right arm. Hitting Nomu in the center of the chest, he sent it flying across the battlefield, making it collide with a group of smaller beasts. Turning around, he saw that Orca took care of the remaining creatures, making the Quinjet with the civilians inside safe from harm's way. Quite an impressive suit there, Midoriya-san. The hero told him, looking up to meet the eyes of the helmet. Thank you. Izuku replied quickly, scanning the field. All Might and All for One were wailing each other near the remains of the warehouse. Any Nomu that tried to get close to the number 1 hero ended up being blown away by the shockwaves the 2 generated whenever their fists collided. A little bit away, Toshi was taking care of some monsters using the PM 3.0 to drill them into the ground or make them pass out. Whatever happened first? Izuku. Momo called him, stepping next to his right, admiring his suit. We only have 2 more locations from where we can dig up civilians. The rest are deeper under rubble. She informed him with a small frown. Okay, I'm going to help Toshi, and after that. Something dropped before them, raising a massive cloud of dust. A high-pitched sound it carried, and the dust disappeared. They saw a massive crater with a Nomu unlike any other. Despite it supporting its body with his arms, they could easily see that it was huge. The muscles it packed rivaled those of All Mights. From the point where the shoulder blades should be, a massive bone-like structure started, going along the back of an elongated neck. The neck itself was devoid of the skin. Around its head was a hood made out of the skin, completely shrouding his face in the darkness, leaving only a pair of the yellowish eyes. Or I'm going to take care of that. Izuku said quickly. Good choice. Orca stated in deadpan voice. Why you, strung? Let us fight. The Nomu yelled at him in a deep, crazed voice. Izuku blinked. Excuse him? Did that thing just speak? Since when did those bioengineered bulldozers could talk? Okay. The ability to speak usually meant that the creature was intelligent. An intelligent Nomu meant problems. Great. The monster rushed at him, surprising Izuku with its speed. The next thing he knew, he was up in the air with a massive dent in the abdomen area. Getting a grip, he used repulsors to stabilize himself, hovering in the air. Looking down, he saw that the thing's arms changed to resemble wings, and sets of thrusters came out from its body, propelling the Nomu at him. Show me yourSSSTREENGTH. The monster shouted. His hood got pushed back, revealing a disgusting face, or rather a brain with a pair of eyes and a mouth with a ray of jagged teeth. Air combat was Izuku's specialty, his domain. Using repulsors, he spun around, marginally avoiding being hit. Releasing a quick pulse from the chest repulsor, he hit the beast on the arm, leaving a nasty burn. Not enough. Nomu yelled, instantly regenerating the damage. Of course, it could regenerate. Activating a device, his left hand shot forward, still connected by a thick cable. It hit its mark, grabbing the creature's leg. Turning around, Izuku pulled hard, swinging the beast to the ground. Unfortunately, it lessened the damage with its thrusters. Cage! Izuku shouted, flying down. At his command, the Nimso delivery system deployed a group of tall, metal beams that hit the ground around the Nomu, zapping it with a high voltage. Then it closed, creating an angular dome. Izuku knew that it would slow the thing down at best. It was too powerful to contain behind the thick titanium plates. He was proven right when a loud banging came from the inside, along with dents outside. Getting into position, compartments on his chest opened, showing an array of speakers. When the cage's wall burst out, showing a massive arm, Izuku activated the PM 3.0. The sound waves destroyed everything on its path, clearing the ground from debris and pushing the beast along the remains of the cage into what was once a block of flats. Not being the one to risk it, he shot 2 long blasts from his hand repulsors, hoping that it put him down. After the dust settled down, he saw the Nomu, still standing, despite 2 massive holes in its body. It laughed at him, making it as creepy as it could get. And then all the damage he did simply disappeared. Clicking his tongue in displeasure, Izuku shot forward, preparing to deliver a robust right punch. Before he got in the striking distance, the creature rose its arm, and it shot at him a mass of muscles and skin. It hit his arm, destroying it in the process. Crap! Puppy, give me a hand. Izuku called hastily, already rising up in the air. The Nomu followed him. To try and stop it, he released a giant, constant beam from his left repulsor, slowing it down just a little. However, it was enough, as the parts came to him, assembling his new right arm. Seeing what exactly it was, Izuku grinned at his child's choice. Stopping the blast, he swung his right fist, hitting the monster across the head. It was so powerful that the muscles on its neck tore, almost decapitating the Nomu. Tensing his chest, he released an uni-beam, cutting the rest of the tissue. Izuku breathed out. There was no way that. An alert made him look down. From the head, a mass of bones, muscles and skin burst out, creating a new body. The beast stood up, flexing a little, making a cracking sound. Just how ridiculous was this thing's regeneration? It smiled creepily at him. Before it could move, Toshi flew at the monster from behind, hitting it with his whips, leaving long gushes. Weak! The Nomu shouted, swatting his friend away like a rag doll. Angered by it, Izuku shot at the beast, hitting it with his leg. Trapping the monster underneath him, he brought his right arm to its head. The fist began pounding the creature in rapid succession. Another mass of tissue sprung forward, hitting him on the side, making him move from his place. The beast stood up and jumped at him. Barely avoiding a fist to his helmet, Izuku delivered a vicious left uppercut. Grabbing the thing by its arm, he pounded it against the ground left and right, hoping that it would at the very least daze the monster. Thrusters with roaring flames came from its back, making him lose his grip. Nomu flew up a little, making a distance between them, before landing. It looked at him with crazy excitement, no doubt enjoying the battle. Izuku took that moment to gather his thoughts. Powerful hits did nothing. His repulsors weren't faring any better. The sound weapon would only destroy the place even more. As long as the head remained intact, there was no way that he could win. He had to go for a killing blow. But he doubted that the monster would allow him to just blast its brain to bits. Suddenly a powerful shock wave hit them. Izuku was at the edge of it, so it only staggered him a little. But the Nomu was closer to the center of it, making it lose its footing. Not being the one to look into the gift horse's mouth, Izuku quickly pushed his feet repulsors to the max, flying at the beast. After delivering a fast 1-2 combo, he then kicked it hard in the abdomen, rising the thing's body in the air. Grabbing it by the neck with his left, Izuku pushed his right fist into its mouth, destroying the monster's teeth. Opening his palm, he fired a beam, making the insides light up. However, it seemed that it still wasn't enough. The creature used its legs against his body, trying to wriggle out. Izuku allowed it to happen, extending his left arm till the end of the cable. Then he pulled it back up, bringing the Nomu close to him. Narrowly avoiding the wild swipe, he secured his hold on the Nomu's head. Pushing it against his chest, he tilted his body slightly up and released an uni beam, keeping going until he felt that his right palm lost its grip. Releasing his hold, he allowed the body to lifelessly fall on the ground, a cloud of smoke still coming from the neck. Gazing at his palm, he saw that it was piping hot but otherwise was fine. He needed to kiss May later for suggesting tungsten as a material. Looking to the side, his breathing stopped. All Might. The number one hero wasn't in his buffed form. His skinny body was kneeling on the ground on a small island, between two deep trenches. Behind him was a terrified woman. What made it even worse was the fact that a news helicopter was above them. The whole world learnt about their favorite hero true form. Gritting his teeth, Izuku flew to All Might, gently putting his hand on the man's back. "How are you holding up?" he asked, looking ahead at the All for One. "Been better." Yagi-san replied hoarsely, coughing up a mouthful of blood. "Ah, if it isn't Izuku Midoriya." The symbol of evil called him, stepping a little closer. "I must say I'm hugely impressed with you and your work. That armor of yours bested my high-end Nomu. It still needed a few months of work, but it was by far the most powerful in my arsenal. Additionally, I must commend you on your music taste. AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, Black Sabbath. My younger days are coming back to me." The man said in delight. "Your strongest, you say? Seems like it could use an upgrade." Izuku replied snarkily, standing up. All for One chuckled a little. "Perhaps you're right. But now if you could step aside. I still need to finish my business with All Might here." The man's right arm bulged with muscles, black spikes grew from it. However, before either of them could make a move, a red glove came from the ground, hitting All for One across the face, making him fly away. "Pow-ee-ee-ear!" Togata-senpai shouted, standing proudly with arms on his hips and white lightning cracking across his body. Thank God that this time the teen was wearing his costume. "Young Togata?" All Might asked, standing up on his shaky legs. "Ah, hey there. Sir called me, saying that you needed a hand." The boy replied, smiling brightly. Then he peeked at Izuku and whistled. "Nice armor, Greenhorn." A clapping sounded through the battlefield. Snapping his head to the side, Izuku saw All for One walking to them. He was relatively unharmed, but his mask was destroyed, showing his scarred head and a giant grin. "And now your successor joins the fray. Just how pathetic you are, to need so much help, All Might?" the villain questioned provocatively. The Quinjet flew above them, from its back Gang Orca jumped off, landing next to Togata-senpai. As the plane continued its way, Izuku saw Momo with a Gatling gun on a tripod. His girlfriend unleashed a volley of bullets at All for One, but all of them bounced off from some kind of invisible force field. "So, what's the plan?" Toshi asked, stopping next to them. "Win." All Might stated firmly, his body once again going into its buff form. Just how cheesy the man could get. The number one and Togata-senpai shot forward, clashing their fist with All for One, creating a giant shockwave. Izuku rose up and caught Orca by his arm, lifting the man from the ground. "Toshi, go from the other side," he ordered, flying in the arc, dropping the hero near the battle. "Blast him with a sound wave." Wow, he was really bossy today, ordering heroes left and right. Nonetheless, Gang Orca followed his instructions, releasing hypersonic waves at All for One. From across, Toshi did the same with a PM 3.0, trapping the villain in a chamber of sound. The symbol of evil visually cringed, almost falling into his knees. Yet, the man still pushed through, releasing an airblast that swooped his friend and the hero from their feet. Using that moment, Izuku shot his left arm, catching the criminal in his grasp. He threw the man in the wide arc. But before All for One could hit the ground, Togata-senpai popped out from it, planting his fist against the symbol of evil's face, causing him to fly high into the air. There he was met with All Might's attack. The hero brought his massive fist down, crashing it against the man's head. All for One's body shot down, hitting the ground with force so great that all of the debris there to fly into the air. After the cloud settled, Izuku saw a massive crater. Before it stood All Might in his true form, left arm above the hero's head, while his right was a bloody mess, lifelessly hanging against his body. The first rays of the sun hit the man's body, illuminating him like something holy. With it, Izuku knew that they had won. Defeat. All for One was utterly defeated, once and for all. Oh, he did not doubt that there was no escaping from his fate now. While the power of his healing quirks would keep him alive, his body took too much damage to function properly ever again. If only he could laugh right now, he would do it. But unfortunately, he was tightly strapped to a metal chair, with belts restraining his every movement, keeping his body rigid. Over his mouth and nose was an oxygen mask, for which he was grateful for. Around him were guards from Tartarus, most likely aiming guns at him. He could feel the faint sound of the engine, meaning that they were still transporting him to the prison. He couldn't use his echolocation quirk or the one that allowed him to precisely sense temperatures. As he was also heavily drugged. While it numbed the pain, it also took away his ability to control his quirks. Only the ones that were always active functioned somewhat correctly. All for One already started thinking about his future life in the depths of Tartarus. Strapped to a wheelchair, numerous pipes and wires hooked into his body with machine guns pointed at his head non-stop. It almost sounded like retirement. Suddenly all sounds vanished. No more engine, no more silent whispers from the guards. He could now clearly hear his own, heavy breathing and blood pumping in his veins. What was going on? The clang of the boots stepping towards him sounded through the void around him. The pace was leisure, like whoever was walking to him had all the time in the world. "Ah, All for One. What a great pleasure is to finally meet you," the person said in a deep, male, slightly smug tone. "Don't bother answering. You took quite a beating at Kamino. I'm actually amazed that you're still conscious." A mass of questions flooded his mind. Who was that man? Why was he here? How he got here? What did that mysterious man want from him? While under normal conditions, he would love to dive into a long-winded conversation, right now he was disturbed by it. An unknown man showing up out of nowhere, in a highly secure truck, seemingly knowing him, all while he couldn't even move his pinky. "Do you mind if I smoke?" the man asked, his speech ever so slightly muted, most likely due to a cigarette in his mouth. "It's my dirty pleasure. I've tried to break with it, but I just can't. Once I've even tried those herbal ones, you know, made from flower petals and so on. But it turns out those are even more disgusting than tobacco," he said to him and took a look puff, breathing it out slowly, filling the transportation chamber with smoke. Additionally, All for One was utterly lost by those actions. "You know, when I first heard about you, about your unimaginable power, your seemingly unlimited potential, I was truly awed," the man said, his voice matching his words. "And when my interest was piqued, I began to gather information about you. Even the smallest rumor didn't miss me. As my knowledge grew, so did my disgust," he said bluntly, his tone as flat as it could get. All for One heard the slow steps around him. Even without his eyes and his quirks, he felt the man's burning, judging gaze lingering on his form. "You're so pathetic. Nothing more than a greedy parasite, stealing from others left and right, leaving misery and grief behind." It sounded like the man spat out those words. "You preached to All Might, how you wanted to save the world from those who are waiting in the shadows, yet all you ever did was mindless destruction." What? How did he know about the talk he had with All Might before their battle? There was no one except for downed heroes and League. "That being said, I pity you. In fact, I can understand you a little. The man stated genuinely, stopping in front of him and blowing a little bit of smoke at his face. After everything you did for Quirk people when Quirk showed up, the payback the government gave you was in the form of basically brainwashing your younger brother. That could no doubt push you over the edge. All for One's jaw hung loose. How did that man get his hands on this? All of this lay beneath a thick web of lies and half-truths made 2 centuries ago. Although it doesn't make it lesser after all of the horrid choices you've made. Instead of forging yourself into something greater, you've become a power-sucking leech, scared of even the smallest shadow. Even your league of villains. The man released a snort at the mention of the organization. More like a league of psychopaths and brats with issues. Perfect ground for followers that can't deviate from trying to fulfill your ego-pandering goals. The man stopped talking and walked around the room a little more. He understood this man's actions less and less. Whoever they were, they knew about him more than anyone else ever did. You know, at first I wanted to wait for a little. Wait for you to be in a Tartarus cell, to sneak in and have this little chat of ours. But after seeing Kamino, I understood that I can't exactly risk having you around for much longer. The chances that this unstable successor of yours gets the idea about trying to rescue you and succeeding in it, however low the chances in it are, they still exist. The man said from somewhere around him. So I need to get rid of you now. Gathering his strength and fighting against the dryness in his throat, All for One finally said the first word since the man showed up. Who, yo? The man chuckled a little, giving it a mysterious and sinister vibe. I suppose that I can grant you the knowledge about my identity before I send you to the deepest pit in hell. During my lifetime, I've been called many names. However, the ones I proud myself the most are the husband of a very strong woman and father of a wonderful child. The man said fondly. But to those who follow and oppose me, know me as different names. Lately, I've been calling myself something new, but I don't want you to hear it. It is reserved for a certain someone. However, you may know me as Dragon. The man whispered the last part, saying the last word in Chinese. If All for One still had eyes, they would be as wide as saucers. He had heard about the man. How could he not? The person before him was the king of the Asian underground, holding China, Taiwan and a small part of India in his iron grasp. Even after his sudden disappearance about 2 decades ago just to Reaper One later, he still was the most feared to be in there. This was one of the people that All for One knew he would have to cross his paths in the future if he wanted to realize his plans. It wasn't the meeting that he was looking forward to. Well, my words are said, and my time here is coming to an end. Goodbye forever, Dr. Kaoru Minakami. Dragon stated coldly, pushing his hand against All for One's chest. There was a sudden sensation. Like something extremely hot touched him, only to change into the overbearing coldness and then into a void. It spread slowly, enveloping him in a blanket made out of the abyss. While this happened, All for One couldn't help but feel excited. The man, who even he was fearing, finally started making moves, stepping into the daylight. He wondered what was going to happen soon. How much the world was going to change without him being there. He etched into his dying mind the fact that Dragon somehow knew his real name. If the man possessed even this knowledge, then most likely nothing could stop him. I'd give everything for her cooking right now. Hotel with a 2 Michelin stars restaurant? Yeah, right. They can't even get a proper homey dish right. Those were the final words that All for One would ever hear. In an old, slightly rundown bar, Inko did her best to give comfort to her friend. When Mitsuki called her earlier that day, she had declined the meeting, as she had to take care of the mess that Izuku got into. Not that she blamed him for it, her child had a heart too big for this world. But now. Oh, Inko! What have I done? My kid is a villain now, . Mitsuki sobbed, raising her head from her hands. Her eyes were red and puffy, tears trailed down her face, and her cheeks were flushed from way too many drinks. Inko put a hand on the woman's shoulder, in a gesture of support. We don't know if he did that on his own accord. He might have been forced into it. She said, trying to sound reassuring. But in reality, she knew it all from Izuku. In actuality, she knew a lot more. Even with Izuku and Stan staying silent, she saw that some medical supplies and her stitching kit were disappearing over time. That and her son from time to time limped quite a bit, even despite his best effort to hide it. Occasionally she found scorched clothes he tried to hide. Plus whenever she asked him about Katsuki, he dodged the question or was silent. He attacked All Might when he tried to save him. Mitsuki murmured as new waves of tears hit her. I've been too pushy with him. I hit him, cursed at him. I've been a terrible mother. Inko enveloped her friend in a tight hug, running her fingers through the woman's hair. She refrained from answering that because she knew that the reply would hurt Mitsuki. Peeking at the clock, she saw that she needed to get home to at least catch a wink of sleep. She would need all the energy she could get for tomorrow. When Izuku told Endeavor that his mom would take care of the lawsuit in a day, he wasn't lying. After ending the battle at Kamino Ward, he left Urania there with Puppy to help the remaining rescue operations. Of course, before he could even get home, Mom called him, announcing that a lawyer dropped by to leave a letter to him. Izuku wasn't surprised their response would be this quick. So here he was, not even 24 hours later, sitting in a highest court bench with his mom as his attorney. His case attracted way too much media attention for his liking. If he wasn't mistaken, almost every news station in Japan sent a reporter here. Was this how celebrities felt? He wasn't enjoying it too much. Directly behind him sat his girlfriend's best friend, future in-laws, Nizu, and to his great surprise, Aizawa-san. Also, how Momo got Mei to wear something formal was beyond him. Behind them were Todoroki-san and his older sister. While the boy had his regular, stoic expression, his sister was more on the nervous side, continually fidgeting. The case started with the prosecutor reading the act, basically saying how he was guilty of breaking that stupid quirkless hero ban law, but putting it in a nice, formal way. Then he gave his testimony that his mom prepared for him. After he was done, came the turn for the witnesses. Gang Orca and Edshot praised him for his wits and pointed out that without his methods, they wouldn't have been able to locate the League of Villains. Orca added that his contribution in the fight was a key to secure the lives of trapped citizens, and taking down All for One. Both heroes stated that Best Jeanist would support their claims if he weren't unconscious in the hospital. Izuku hoped that the man would recover fast, as Jeanist was one of the better heroes out there. Nizu, of course, told the judge just how great of a student he was. How his innovations helped him and other teachers run the school, both financially and administratively. And added that he had a bright future as a hero and inventor. Izuku made a mental note to send the principal a basket. Then the doors opened, and Yagi-san walked in with the support of Detective Tsukachi. The hero announced that despite his injuries, he came to add his 2 cents to the case. All I wanted to say is that young Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya is a man who I can relate to. At first, I was diagnosed quirkless, and if that ridiculous law were there during my time, I'd given up. But young Midoriya has a greater heart and mind than me. Without him, I might have lost 2 days ago. Without him, many people would have died. Without him, our future will be swallowed by darkness. Yagi-san's passionate words moved the crowd so much that he got a standing ovation. No matter how much the judge tried to calm down the people by hitting his hammer, they ignored him. Tsukachi-san followed it by more calm and technical testimony but still added a few his own opinions, smiling lightly at him. Izuku was sure that they had it in their pocket. The prosecutor gave up by the time Nizu was talking, and when All Might walked in, he looked like he wanted to walk out. The judges also seemed to be on his side. He wouldn't get scot-free, at most he'd have to do was to pay a fine and do some public work. However, before the judge finished listening, the door opened with a loud bang and Endeavor waltzed in with the grace of an elephant. The man started talking without permission, spilling lies and twisted truths. His mom tried to get the judge to throw the hero out, but the man just waved his hand dismissively and continued to listen to what burning trash can had to say. At first, Izuku let it be, as it wouldn't change the outcome. Then Endeavor pulled a video from Kamino Ward and began pointing out how his involvement was unnecessary. Going as far as saying that Izuku was an obstacle in the rescue operations, that he put the civilians' lives in danger. At this point, he decided that enough was enough. "Can't you do something about him?" he whispered to his mom, his eye twitched a bit. "Unfortunately, if the judge won't throw him out, then my hands are tied." His mom replied, clearly irritated by it. "Stupid old goat." Goat? To him, the judge reminded more of a mule, but whatever worked. "If I were to do something stupid, then as my lawyer you would advise against it, right?" he questioned, received a curt nod. "But as my mother?" he continued, smiling a little. "I'd say go for it, but be home by dinner." His mom replied with a smirk. That's all he needed to hear. Additionally, he was kind of glad that Stan wasn't among the living anymore. Because if he were, he would sit here with a bucket of popcorn, enjoying the show all too much, teasing him till the end of the times. So as it stands, I firmly believe that Izuku Midoriya should be punished for the actions he took, by giving up his technology for the good of society. Endeavor finally ceased his testimony, smirking victoriously. Thank you for your input, Endeavor. Izuku said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. I'm sure that you were hot and bothered keeping it all to yourself for this long. He started smugly, gaining a wave of laughter. What are you doing, child? The number 2 snapped at him, looking at him with a pointy gaze. Oh, nothing much, really. Your body was in a way between monitor and me, and I wanted to take a look at the video of my creation. Izuku said, walking past the man, ignoring the low growl. On the monitor was a frozen frame of him in the Nimso suit. He designed it to be as close to the Hulkbuster from Age of Ultron as he could, but of course, there still was a need to change things here and there. Nonetheless, the armor was fantastic. Damn, do I look dazzling in it? Izuku said, nodding to himself. Don't get used to it. Soon you'll have to give it to the real heroes. Endeavor stated smugly, looking down on him. Yeah. I don't think so. He replied, more interested in his nails than the hero. And why is that? Burning Trash can demanded harshly. Because before the judge says that I have to, I'm going to blow everything up. Izuku said nonchalantly, still not gracing the hero with his gaze. Silence settled in the room. Some of the journalists dropped their pens. Everyone was gaping at him, especially Aizawa-san, who was pallier than a white wall. All of my armors, arc reactors, servers holding data from my research. Izuku looked up, straight into Endeavor's wide eyes. Urania that is helping with rescue operations. Everything is going kaboom. He ended his statement with a lazy smile. You're bluffing. No one would willingly walk with a bomb strapped to their chest. The number 2 growled out, a bit of his fire singing the wood from the barrier. Well, unlike you, I have the balls to do it. Izuku stated, shrugging a little. A massive gasp came from the public. What did you say? Endeavor barked, his flames flaring up. You heard me, you overgrown matchstick. He waited quite a while to use that one. The pissed-off face of the Burning Trash can made it definitely worth it. But let's not focus on me here. Let's us talk about you. He said, pointing his finger at the number 2. Me? The hero questioned with a quirked brow. Yes, you, my good fellow. Izuku replied happily, walking back and forth before the jury's table. Despite you being the number 2 hero in Japan for over 20 years, people seem not to know anything about you. You have nothing on me, child. Endeavor stated proudly with a knowing smirk. We shall see. He said, flashing his best copy of Tony's smile. And he did not work on that one for hours before the mirror. Pulling out a black earpiece from his pocket, Izuku slid it on his ear. Alan, initiate the Vanity Bonfire protocol. With pleasure, sir. The AI replied in the sing-song voice. The feed on monitor glitched, before going completely black. Not even 2 seconds after, a green Iron Man helmet popped out on it, making a murmur raise. Then a list of files and folders showed up. Since it all started with me, let us begin from there. Izuku said, folding his hands behind his back, trying to look like a professional businessman. On the screen, several pictures opened, all of them showing the hate comments on the websites dedicated to his hero persona. As you can see, those comments hold some harsh words about me and my work. Someone hurt your ego, boy? Endeavor asked with a snort. Izuku just smirked a bit, already waiting for the man's reaction on his next comment. Funny thing is that, after checking a bit, I discovered that all of the IP addresses lead to the places connected with you. As he ended that sentence, Alan pulled out the evidence. Your hero office, your neighborhood, the sites that you have solid connections. You get where I'm going with this? Izuku asked, his smirk widening a little at the hero's scowl. That doesn't prove my involvement in it. Matchstick growled at him with a searing gaze. Whatever you say. He shrugged out, duly noting that reporters were taking notes. How about we switch to your hero work? Or more precisely, your image. The hateful glare from the number 2 was all he got. Not wasting any time, Izuku whispered to Alan what to put first. Here we've got the sites on which people talk about heroes' actions. Be it a simple patrol, villain fights or rescue efforts. And the sections on the screen are dedicated to you. He stated as all of the negative comments highlighted. The ones marked yellow were erased several times from the net, and the accounts were banned. Leaving only a neutral one, seeing as there are hardly any good ones. You suggest that I ordered my informatics team to alter it? Burning Trash can barked at him, showing off his teeth. Exactly, the same case with newspapers, videos, and pictures. As he called, each element was brought forward. Seeing as we've got so many journalists here, let's ask them something. Izuku stated, walking closer to the public. Did your news stations ever did at least one report regarding Endeavor that put him in a bad light? The majority rose their arms. And did that material got taken out the second it went live? The number of hands didn't change. Were your companies threatened with a lawsuit or giant fines? Still the same amount. Turning around on his heel, he gazed right into tiny, blue orbs and grinned. There you have it. You better stop it, child, before. The hero said in a low tone. Before what? You get physical with me? You burn me? Izuku asked, stepping to the side. Good thing that I have fireproof pants. His comment got the public to laugh. But while we're at burning, let's have a look at this video. A bit of backstory. This one was uploaded over 40 times from different accounts, each and every time, it was taken down in 5 minutes. Unfortunately, it's muted. The low-quality video played, showing Endeavor fight with some villain who had a minor earth manipulation quirk. The street was on fire along with some buildings. Suddenly the hero shot out a massive fireball at his enemy. The man somehow dodged it with help from his power. However, the fireball continued, hitting the house behind it, instantly covering the whole structure in flames and making an explosion. The house belonged to an elderly couple, who fortunately was out during the fight. The building burned to ashes. With it, all of their belongings, counting into it the pictures and videos of their deceased daughter. Izuku stated somberly. His hardened gaze was burying itself into Endeavor. The couple never got compensation from Endeavor's office, and the news sites that tried to publicize the story went bankrupt. Many whispers arose from the public and with them many flashes from cameras. However, the hero in question stood in his place like a rock, glaring at him. Izuku shook his head. It seemed like the man really didn't care about it at all. Many more stories are displaying the damage you did and do during your fights, along with the excess show of cruelty towards your opponents. And that's just a tip of the iceberg. He said and waited a moment, before grinning widely. But let us look at your wonderful family. That got a reaction from the matchstick. It made him flinch, even if it was barely visible. Also, his flames got a tad hotter. There's obviously you, the biggest sunshine there is. Then we've got your youngest son, your middle son and only daughter. He stated, sending a small wave towards the two Todorokis. From Endeavor's surprised reaction, he guessed that the man had no idea that his children were present. How lovely. But what about your oldest son and wife? Don't you dare to say another word. Burning Trashcan yelled, startling some people. Izuku completely ignored the fact that the barrier was set on fire, his hand pointing at the monitor. There was the article that, of course, was taken down before its release. However, that wasn't the point here. He was more interested in the picture. Here we can see there was a fire in your neighborhood a few years ago. And the most noticeable thing here is the azure-colored flames. Your quirk obviously can't make those naturally. But your oldest son on the other hand? Izuku cut here, showing a picture from the training camp, or more especially the blue flames that burned the forest. After that accident, Tuya Todoroki went missing. He never showed up at UA, never in the nearby shops, never in the charity events that you took your family to look better. Of course, Izuku knew where the young man was, or rather who he was. He wasn't that stupid and could put 2 plus 2 together. Additionally, the files from the hideout raid proved his theory right. He guessed that by this time, the journalists here also caught up. Then there's your wife. Rei Todoroki, who for the last decade, resides in a mental ward in a hospital. He said, popping out the image of the woman. You cannot disclose that information. Endeavor told him with a victorious smirk. Izuku just smirked and snapped his fingers. Wow, you're on the hot streak with how wrong you are today. Walking out to the bench, he took his briefcase and fished out some papers. Stepping to the judge's table, he handed them over. The baffled judge took it and gave it a once-over. One of them is a copy of a document that says that Rei Todoroki is in the care of her daughter, Fuyumi Todoroki. The other one is a formal agreement between Fuyumi Todoroki and Izuku Midoriya, allowing him to get access to the records of Rei Todoroki that the caretaker allows. There you have it. Izuku flashed a smile at the hero, who looked like he was about to explode. I won't reveal too much, as Fuyumi-san requested me not to, but here's one intriguing thing. After Shoto Todoroki started visiting his mother in the hospital, her mental state improved significantly. The leading doctor was very impressed with it and told the caretaker that the patient might be released after some time. However, 2 days later, the man phoned in, vetoing his words. Maybe my wife's state didn't improve that much. Endeavor growled out, looking about a second from flipping. Nice theory. Izuku nodded before striking a thinking pose. But here's the better one. A few days ago, some hospitals released to the public their finances during a protest from doctors and nurses. Among them was the hospital in which Rei Todoroki is currently admitted. Walking closer to the screen, a list with dates and sums popped out. One specific time was highlighted. The one in yellow is exactly a day later after Fuyumi-san received the happy news that her mother would be coming home. And we all can see that the sum here is rather substantial. Coincidence? I think. A fireball hit the monitor, breaking the thing and making sparks fly. Some of the public screamed in fear. Turning around, he saw the pissed-off face of Endeavor, who had his left hand drawn back with a swelling fireball in it. Before the man could throw it, all of his flames doused, and ice encased his body, leaving only the head free. Looking further back, he saw Aizawa-san glaring at the matchstick from behind his goggles with his hair up in the air. Next to him, Todoroki-san released an icy breath, a line of crystal ice coming from his foot. You insolent brat. Who do you think you are? You're just a quirkless reject. A remnant of the past. How dare you get in my way? You should give all of your toys and erase yourself into the shadows. Society doesn't need people like you. Pebbles on the roads to greatness. Burning trash can finally snapped, screaming at the top of his lungs. His face was all red, matching his hair nicely. There were also a few veins sticking out. And just like that, Izuku knew that he won. He didn't expect Endeavor to lose his cool and openly attack him, but color him impressed. With all of the juicy details he gave to the present reporters, he could only assume what kind of a magnificent drama he created. Suddenly a slow clapping sounded through the room. Looking ahead, Izuku saw a tall man in a fancy red suit coming toward them. The man had ash-gray skin, his hair mostly strawberry red with a bit of black at the tips. The style reminded him of deer ears. There were also small, black deer antlers coming from the top of his head. A red-tinted monocycle over his right eye. I came here for another reason, but when I saw you pull all of that evidence, I couldn't stop myself from the listening. What a performance, kid. I hadn't been that entertained since the stock market problems in Europe 2 decades ago. The man's voice sounded a bit off, like it was coming through an old radio. His joyful, full red eyes gazed at him, and his wide grin showed off his pointy, yellowish teeth. Then there were his moves that were over the top, helping him express his delight. Thanks, I guess. Izuku replied, blinking, not being sure how to proceed. Who are you? That sounded like a good start. Oh, where are my manners? Lucifer Morningstar, one of the United Nations official representatives. The man stated, flashing a document that he pulled seemingly out of nowhere. Your Honor, this whole circus is just a waste of everyone's time. Although it did amuse me quite a bit. What do you mean by that? The judge asked, inching closer. Morningstar-san walked to the table and pulled out a stack of papers from his coat. This right here is the decision of the United Nations Court regarding that nonsense called quirkless hero ban law. Izuku already liked the man. To sum it up, the UN believes that this law is an open act of discrimination towards the quirkless part of society and gave Japan an ultimatum. Your Prime Minister agreed to take it out, saving your country from terrible consequences. Why did his voice get more malicious at the end? However, Tsukasa Toriki didn't release the information about it. When did Prime Minister sign those documents? His mom asked, already spotting a huge smile. An hour before your son plus his friends moved from UA to the training camp to save the students and heroes there. The man replied, turning to them. Toriki is already in Interpol custody. As for this fellow here, Morningstar-san said, chuckling darkly. Detective Tsukachi, I believe that you can handle him. Of course. The policeman replied, glaring at the number 2. Now, I did my job. It was quite a pleasure meeting you, Izuku Midoriya. The man said, taking his hand and giving him an overly vigorous shake. Oh, Principal Nizu, you may want to look at your desk, once you return to the school. Morningstar-san stated mysteriously. Then he walked past him like he owned the place. Which he probably did. His girls rushed to him, trapping him in a tight hug. Soon his mother and in-laws joined in, almost taking away his precious air. But Izuku didn't care. The sound of the judge's hammer and his voice announcing that the case is closed. The reporters tried to get to him, but Toshi, Aizawa-san and surprisingly Todoroki-san acted as his bodyguards, keeping the vultures away. The group moved with him to the exit. When they walked out of the building, the Quinjet was already parked at the patio before the court, where puppy waving at them. Izuku released a sigh and cracked a smile. It was finally over. Not even a week later, Izuku found himself at Nizu's office. The principal himself was taking the arm of the armchair on which Yagi-san sat. His girlfriends flanked him on the sofa. On another couch sat his mom, Toshi, and Detective Tsukachi. All of them had agreed to meet and talk about the latest developments. And boy, there were a lot of them. After the lawsuit, the media was buzzing with news about it. Each station giving out its own spin-off, but all saying the same thing, that Toriki and Endeavor were behind bars and the quirkless weren't freaks of nature. "How is the investigation going, Tsukachi-san?" Nizu asked, holding a cup of tea. The detective chuckled a little. "The officers are still looking through the materials that you've provided. They still have to go through more than a half." Toshi turned to him, gracing Izuku with a dry look. "Remind me to never piss you off." That got a round of chuckles from everyone and a small whine from Momo that sounded similar to language. He really should show her that scene from Age of Ultron. "Speaking of investigation, is there any lead for the League of Villains?" Yagi-san asked, shifting the atmosphere in the room to a more somber one. Everyone eyed the detective, who had a light scowl and drummed his fingers against themselves. "I shouldn't really disclose this information here," Tsukachi-san stated, breaking the pregnant pause. "But no. They're laying low. We don't know where All for One sent them. Plus from Midoriya's explanation, it's going to be hard to find them if Kurojiiri didn't open his portals there frequently." Izuku nodded at that. The study on warp quirks proved that while you can track them due to their energy signature, it's tough to do if there's not much of it in one spot, as it could be easily mistaken. Usually with gamma radiation. Additionally, they would need to make a much denser grid to even attempt it, thus creating a rucksack and alarming the villains about the search. "Shame that we cannot try to get that information from All for One." Nizu spoke with a grimace and a soft sigh. Right, that monster." While the public version said that the man was kept in the depths of Tartarus, only a few knew the truth. Yagi-san told them in a show of confidence that they would keep it a secret. The symbol of evil was gone for good. He didn't escape. All for One was made into a pile of dust on his way there. The interference of a third party was more than sure, seeing as all of the watches that the officers had been about 2 minutes behind the actual time. They suspected a time manipulation quirk or something along those lines, which in Izuku's mind was a fair assumption. However, a power like that was even rarer than warp quirks. Peeking at Nizu, Izuku saw the principal in deep thought. Was the rodent blaming himself for what happened to his ex-students? He didn't know anything about Tuya Todoroki-san, so he couldn't understand the man. Bakugo, on the other hand. Izuku wouldn't deny the fact that before the blonde got his quirk, they were the best friends. Their moms were close, which in turn only encouraged the two to get to know each other better. Of course, after Explosion popped out and people started showering Bakugo with praises, the boy's ego grew so much that the kid became a bully, who took pleasure in beating up other children. Don't get him wrong, Izuku was still a bit shocked when Bakugo switched sides. He didn't expect this in his wildest imaginations. Sure, he wouldn't call Pomeranian his friend or even acquaintance. Firecracker destroyed all and any delusions he had about that matter years ago. What Izuku felt was a kind of respect to the blonde menace, or rather to his will to win. They were a bit similar in that matter, wanting to prove themselves, even if their reasons to do so were much different. One wanted to do it to prove himself to the world as the best, the other wanted to make a statement to society. Izuku's brain couldn't help but wonder. What would happen if Bakugo didn't grow up to be an arsehole? Would they be friends? Or at the very least could tolerate each other? Actually, wasn't it a similar case with Toshi? The idiotic beliefs that their quirk society threw at people made their peers close-minded and pushed them to discriminate the teen due to his genes. While Pomeranian was praised for it, his best friend had to suffer. This was so wrong. Certainly, quirks were impressive and all that jazz, but they shouldn't define a person's worth. Why did society all but beat into almost everyone's head? Surely there was something. A round of silent laughs and chuckles reached his ears, pulling Izuku out from his bubble. Looking around, he saw that others had amused smiles, giving him looks of interest. He was mumbling again, wasn't he? Sorry about that. I got caught up in my thoughts, he said, scratching his cheek lightly. We could see that. So what did that incredible mind of yours cocked up? Nizu questioned, smirking at him. Ugh. Nothing much. It's just a stupid idea. There was no way that this would go through. Izuku. Momo called him, gazing at him lovingly. The only stupid ideas that you have are whenever you fight. Like she was the one to talk with what she did at the camp. Yeah, you're the smartest person in any room you walk into. Mei added, grinning at him. You want me to brainwash you, so you can talk freely? Toshi asked seriously, with a small smirk threatening to get free. Seeing no other option, but to tell what he was thinking, Izuku leaned a bit forward and clasped his hands in front of his mouth. He bored his gaze into the table, gathering his thoughts. I'm going to be blunt and sorry for the word, but our society is pretty fucked up. Hearing his mom's and Momo's gasp, he already knew that he was up to a good start. His friend's snicker didn't help any bit. We're almost literally spoon-fed into believing that our quirks, our genes, are the most deciding factors about ourselves. For example, they're more likely to hire someone with a power that makes them read faster as a secretary, even if their qualifications are low. The same with heroics. Heroes with flashy, powerful quirks get more limelight. Even UA's entrance exam is centered around it. He gave Nizu a pointy look, making Principal nod sadly at it. All because we're made to believe that quirks are everything that matters, which of course, is wrong at its very core. It's not like you can change it with a snap of your fingers. Tsukachi-san cut in, making a gesture with his left hand. Oh, the irony. No, I can't. Izuku agreed with the detective, before stopping and gazing around the room, catching everyone's eyes. But it can be fixed. How so? Yagi-san asked, tilting his head. It's a bit cheesy, but as we all know, the young are the future, right? So if we set up schools that teach kids that it doesn't matter what kind of genes you possess, what really matters are your actions, then we can change the future. Of course, it won't be perfect, but the chances of the next endeavor and Bakugo are less. The possibilities that people like Toshi, who are believed that their quirks are villainous, would be lower. All we need is a starting point. Izuku spoke seemingly on one breath, his voice carrying as much conviction as it could. He saw that everyone was really mulling over his words, especially Nizu. Feeling something soft and slightly wet pressed against his cheeks, he looked between his girls, who smiled at him brightly. Toshi was giving him a grateful look, and his mom was beaming with pride. That an excellent idea, young Midoriya. The principal chipperly said, gaining his attention. We can create the project and give it to the parliament to discuss. Of course, we still need to write it down and iron out the details. The rodent stated, his small, black eyes moving between his mom and Yagi-san. Would you two be willing to help me out with it? Certainly, now that I'm on retirement, I need something to do. The ex-number 1 hero spoke, nodding his head. I believe that after all of this mess, we need something that's going to lead us toward better times. A good change is always welcomed. His mom added, smiling a little. Nizu smirked at them. And Izuku knew that smirk. It meant that the principal had something else that he was waiting for the perfect moment to reveal. Speaking about change. The rodent started, his paw digging behind the pillow of the armchair. He pulled out a thick, gray folder, and laid it on the table, pushing it towards Izuku. There's something that you may be interested in. All 4 of you, my wonderful students. Right, Nizu just had to be a drama queen. Still, that piqued their interest, making them scoot closer. Izuku, being at the center, took the folder and opened it. He barely saw the title page, and already a giant grin plastered itself on his face. Oh, change was certainly coming. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe and support the original writer. It helps the channel and the story. Thanks for watching and see you next time.